Hello, let's see. Is this working? I think it is. I think it's working. Ooh. All is silence. Goodness gracious me. It's not all silent. I am here. I just wanted to give you plenty of time to see the Bru Ships introduction one. Sorry, I've been playing around with that today. Right then. So, I am trying something different. As you can see, I have a huge, just the screen going, and it's all that. Now, I am trying to run it all through the computer. The reason I'm trying to run it all through the computer is, to be honest, today I've been having fun. My phone has died and all sorts of things. And, it's just been that sort of kind of day. So, hello, Richard Hughes. Hello, Jerison. Hello, Martina Henry. Hello, Jay Lingworth. Hi, Bitchin. Hi, Tis Francis Fault. Hello, haven't seen you in a while. Hope you're well. Hi, Blue Shirt Buddha. Hi, Martin Doherty. I think I've said already, but I'll say again. Hi, Albert. Hi, Stephanie. Hi, John. Hi, Kilo19. Hi, the new AKB 4772. Hi, Jeffrey Indorf. Greetings to Ohio. You have some of the best model railways over in Ohio. Seriously, I get jealous. I watch the YouTube videos of them all. Hi, Sean Mack. Hi, Jeff Beeler. Hi, Paul Johnson. Hi, Blue Shirt Butter again, I think. Hi, John Luke. Hi, Michael Rose. Hi, Eleonora. I was just actually, if you feel like going quickly onto Patreon, you will find, Eleonora, that your paper, your suggested topic, has made it through to the list to vote for. That vote is live. Jennifer, nice picture, Alex. Is it available as a print, and if so, where? Right then. Hello. The picture is not available as a print yet, or anything like that. But I do keep having a chat with Drac about various things, so we'll see. Now, the thing is, if I have the chat up at full screen so I can properly watch the chat, I can't really see what I'm doing on the video screen or what the video screen is doing. So you'll have to bear with me. If anything happens on there that's going weird, just put it on the chat. Just tell me I have gone weird or wacky doodle or I'm now off screen, because I'm going to be relying on you for this. Hello, Halifax. Hi, Plebiscite, and hi, David Kocher. Jeffrey Onoff, when are you having funeral for your phone? This poor thing has survived a lot. You can't see it, but it has got huge scratches down the edge. My girlfriend, and I do think she's watching, calls this phone occasionally the Frankenstein phone, the fact that it's still alive. But it does take great pictures of documents, and I got it set up, and I've had it now for a couple of years. But the contract has now run out, so I probably will have to replace it and see if I can't find another one. And before anyone asks, yes, it is the Samsung, because usually, and I have tried this with my aunt's iPhone and my sister's iPhone when she had one, all these things, I find that actually Samsungs take better pictures of documents than iPhones. iPhones take better pictures of people. Samsungs take better pictures of documents. And at last check, my phone has taken somewhere in the region of 200,000 pictures of documents and merely a couple of thousand to 3,000 pictures of people. So I go the way I need it to go. Hello, Carl von Casburn. Hi, King George V. Before we get too much in, KG5, have you seen the video done on Tribals, Battles, and Darings, and did you find a picture in there for you? Because there was a special picture I went and dug out for you from my book collection for the book for that video. Pepper said, "Oh, God, relying on chat." Well, you know, it'll work. It'll work. It's funny because I'm sure my phone is starting to die too, which means I have to spend yet more money. I do not like. No, I have Scottish and Cornish blood in me in high concentrations. Spending money is not what my people do. We take money. We get given money. You pay us for things. We do not spend money. Two notoriously not tight, but let's put it this way: if they have a choice between spending the money and not spending the money, it's not getting spent. Oh, that works. That works very nicely. I can do that. Now I can wander around, see that. Oh, that might work. That might work in a little bit in the image. Okay, I will have a rough idea now. I will have a rough idea. Ooh, that could work quite well. Okay, right. So I've got a partial idea on the picture now as well. So, who knows? It could all work. God bless the little laptop. She's working well. We're proud of her. Thomas Rottweiler, hello. All right then. So, it's going to be in the book, that picture. That picture and a whole lot of others. I've been sorting out roughly 160 pictures. So if all are put in, there will be, the book itself will be 7 chapters ranging from about 8,000 to 14,000 words. And I know chapters are supposed to be roughly even, but they couldn't be because there were things that need to be put in them, and some of them are very technical chapters, and I would hate to break that up between different chapters because it would just make it weird. I'd be repeating myself the whole time. Is that a beanie poodle next to lamb and hat? Yes, it is a beanie poodle. This was a present from my lovely girlfriend. So, and I occasionally forget the name, the official name. This name I call her, which is Blackie. And it's Gigi. This is Gigi. Woolly, and of course you all know nuts. Fresh brew, I see. Yes, I have both this, which is my celebration for when I email. This is being saved today for when I emailed in the book. All the pictures, everything done, sorted out. Everything goes in today. And this is being saved for it. So today I have been going through this stuff. I might have started the brew earlier without you all. But I've got plenty of that to keep me going, and I can always grab some water. So, we're fine. Steamlight, I have survived hours and hours of explosion in the last 48 hours. Good luck. I'm presuming 4th of July in the United States. Yes, that is when the fireworks come to all of us. Paul Johnson, good job you're not from Yorkshire. The Scottish and Cornish would give the Yorkshiremen a run for their money. Tis Francis fault. The answer is years and years of over imbibing of it. I am, in the nicest way, my teeth, touch wood, are a miracle according to my dentist. My liver is even more a miracle according to my doctor. And the fact that I don't drink alcohol and I don't smoke probably is some factor that this is my major vice. Thomas Rottweiler, did it cost a lot of permissions? It did cost a fairly large amount, but I have to say the very nice Drakenfennel, or as I call him something slightly different, but Drakenfennel, Drac. I was short of pictures, and none of the picture people were responding. And Drac went, "I have some photos," and I went, "Thank you." And he had a huge number of photos, so he's very, very much thanks to Drac on that one, getting over that limit and getting a number. Right. So today's books are superpower themed, between the different superpowers. Now, the least superpower themed on a lot is one I wanted to start you all off on is Stalin by Dmitry Volkanov. Mainly because it comes from the one period when actually Russian authors were beginning, and I say beginning, to properly examine Stalin. Certainly under the current regime, that is less and less a case. And prior to this, it certainly wasn't possible. So, whilst it is not perfect, there are going to be few authors who are going to have the access this author had to the Soviet archives, at least in the foreseeable future. And definitely not an author who has the combination of having met him, lived under him, and then being able to look at those archives to write about him. As such, it's one of the books which is most interesting when it comes to Stalin. But you have to remember, it's still written in the Soviet era. So whilst it was written in the post-Stalin Soviet era, it is still written in the Soviet era, and it's good. But you've got to remember that when reading it, okay? Carl Hammond, have we seen any hope of seeing a video of you at the Tank Museum doing a top 5 tanks, please? Give me and Drac a day out, we'll probably do that. Seriously, I owed a guy at least a trip to the Tank Museum with me driving. He's done so much for me. He's such a superstar. I owe him several trips. Steven, Reddit got out 3 other bios of him. I think Stephen King books are less scary than that man. Yes, they are. But if you want to understand Stalin, if you want to understand, unfortunately, it's one of those things. When I talk to people and they start talking to me about communism, I go, yes, on paper, communism can look fantastic. Unfortunately, in reality, it has to be implemented by people, and it does tend to produce a certain type of person getting to the top. The biggest example of that type of person isn't actually Stalin. It's Chairman Mao. But let's be honest, we are not going to get an honest autobiography of Mao produced from China anytime soon. So the next best thing is Stalin. It's good, though. It is really good. After that, I'm going to go for, well, keep with the Stalin theme. Greetings. Checking into port before heading back home to the mountains. Hello, Austin. Carl Hammond. Okay. Why do you contact them by might want you and Drac for their channel? Just wondering. It could be quite interesting, that one. Two naval historians wander around going, oh, big guns. Jeff Beeler, Pol Pot. Pol Pot isn't really what I would call a product of a communist system. He's just a madman. Literally just a nutter. Ugh. Richard Hughes Bear. Oh, good lord. No. Now, for those of you who are interested in what ifs and ship design fleets, I want you to have a what if question. What if Stalin lived a bit longer? Because he was building this. Stalin had plans. He had an ocean-going fleet, and this was produced by Jürgen Roher and Mikhail S. Monkanov. So, you know the really massive book, which has disappeared at the moment. That's over here. Now, you all know I'm always going on about Roger and Rohr's Chronology of the War at Sea. So, after I got that book years ago, I spotted another book in the Amazon selection, because this is how Amazon milks money out of me. And this is why Amazon and eBay are responsible for costing me around about £500 a day in books. Hopefully, my girlfriend and mum aren't watching that. The lovely girlfriend's mum, who could be watching this, won't mind me spending that much on books. The other two will probably worry what I've done to my bank accounts. Oh, yes. But no, they were good. They're really good books. They're really, really good books. They're Brassey's guides to the fleets from the interwar period. But leaving that to one side, when I did the purchase on Amazon of that, I spotted Jürgen Rohr came up again for this book, Stalin's Ocean-Going Fleet. And it's got beautiful pictures. It's got beautiful plans. I have to admit, the actual paper cutting and producing is a little bit rough and ready. But it's got all these wonderful tables of statistics, and it really gives you a really different idea on what Stalin wanted for the fleet and what Russia could have started building if he'd lived a little longer. And frankly, that would have been really interesting. If the Soviets had managed to build any battleships prior to World War II, or even some of the ones they were planning for after World War II, oh my, that would have been a very different world. If the Soviet Union had launched a battleship post-World War II, and they even had their own battle carrier design. How Russian the Soviet Union is this? They have a battle carrier design. It's absolutely terrible, but they have the design. It is something worth reading. It will make you laugh. It will make you giggle. It will also make you think. There are some straight up tribal class rip-offs in here as well. He has plans for all sorts of things, what they build during World War II, what they're planning for post-World War II, the future plans of Stalin's fleet. Ah, yes, here it is. This is the 1950. I'm going to move this down so I can see if you can see this. The 1950. Sorry, new webcam doesn't like the autofocus sometimes. There you go. 1950 battleship plans. And my goodness me, was this a big beast. 1950, the Battleship Project 24. Displacement 72,950 standard tons. Length 282 meters. Maximum speed 30 knots. 9 40.6 centimeter guns. Yes, that's 40.6 centimeters. I'm working that out in my rough inch conversion. 2.54. Let's say that's 4 plus 16-inch guns. Yep. 16 30-centimeter guns. So that's your AA mount. And 48 4.5 centimeters. They have plans for all sorts of things. They have behemoths. Full load, the Project 24 would have been weighed in at 81,150 tons. They would have had 4 70,000 horsepower engines. Wow. It's colossal. Brock, you do realize this is the one my little cousins watch, but I will allow that because that is about beer. Right, let's see. Stalin needed carriers to have an ocean. Good evening. Morning, Airman. Paul. Oh. Right. Siromak, we will call it the High Seas Fleet. What do you mean the German already has taken? Yeah, this is a good, interesting book, by the way. Okay, Tasnats as a tribal equivalent. There are a few in there designed. They never actually get built. Awesome. Okay, so fun idea for X 1,000 subs contest. Subscribers play and submit. Oh, ooh, that could be fun. Right then, that could be okay. That could be as is X. That could be fun. I might do a contest like that for the 10,000 subscribers contest. If I get to, I might do. I'm considering doing these sort of things. I'm having a chat at some point when this is all over. Me and Drac are going out for a few field trips because I owe him because of what he's done so much, and B for a lunch to actually discuss this stuff. Juno 191, hi. Why does the USSR Russia need a large fleet? They are land power. What was the idea behind it? Basically, Stalin wanted a huge fleet because he wanted to do naval diplomacy and he wanted to distract the European power. He wanted to be a global power. And in the nicest way, you can't be a global power by being a land power. You cannot be a global power by being an air power because your aircraft have to come back. Your vehicles can't go nowhere. You can only be a global power by being a maritime power. It's what China's realized and why they're investing in the fleet. It's why America has a navy when they are quite simply a huge continent. It's why Britain managed to rule the world for so long despite having a laughably small army and naval services, because it was most powerful maritime power. If these battleships had been built, you would have probably seen Vanguard get some siblings. The Royal Navy would have kept some battleships going on. The French. It's amazing if the Soviet Union had actually built battleships, the navies that would have been developed post 1950 would have been very different than the ones that were actually built. Steve Mike puts it, world is mostly water. World power means naval power. Projection through the air, still limited. Yeah. Basically, air power has a small problem in that it depends on air bases to rearm. You can rearm a ship at sea. I know there's trouble now with VLS systems and all these things, but you can actually rearm the guns definitely at sea, and you can. Let's put it this way: you can redevelop the systems to enable you to rearm the missiles at sea. You cannot rearm aircraft in midair at the moment. Current level tech, we can't. So until we have, I don't know, shield helicarriers, that's why air power is limited versus sea power, just in terms of global reach. And also, the thing is, once you turn up a ship, it can sit there for as long as you want it to, pretty much, and you can replace it. Whereas aircraft have to go back to the airbase and have to then refitted, and you have to make sure the airbase is close enough to get them, and all sorts of things. And Juno 191. All of the animals are curious, and she's all take a swipe at a dog. Juno 191. Perfect time. Just got home from picking up a new cat. That explains that one. Okay. China scares the number 2 animal. It's a problematic one. Exactly. And Russia had a giant ocean border, including Arctic. You can't have constant in the Arctic without a fleet. Nope. Do you know what I mean? Is it where the Colorado basically a reverse Nelson? To an extent, Jeff, Could the Soviets have done anything with the Graf Zeppelin? No, it was mangled. Honestly, they couldn't do anything with her when they got at the end of World War II. Eamon, could Britain actually afford new battleships after 1945? Well, that's always an interesting question. The thing is, Britain couldn't afford it because they were choosing to put the money into other things. But the trouble is, they could do that because they didn't have the pressing need. If you'd had the pressing need, you'd have had to find the money. It would have been difficult, it would have been problematic, and the Americans would have probably had to be seriously rethink their position on the British Empire, because the British Empire would be propping up Britain's navy, and America would need Britain's navy far more. So, these sort of things. But it's like currently, if you consider the current crisis going up, when money's needed, it's found. Montori, we'd just love to see Dennis Healy and not John Knott trying to destroy it. Yeah, that would have been a very interesting scenario for them to deal with. Steam White, Soviets need ice-free ports to have a real fleet. They need some more land. Yeah, that's the other problem. And as Martin Norris pointed out, UK was spending 10% of GDP on defence after World War II. It wasn't exactly not prepared to spend money. Jeff Miller, what do you know about design based on the incomplete hull of the battlecruiser Kronstein? No, it's all in here. If you want to have a full look at that, please go look at this. Please, this book is amazing. I cannot recommend it high enough. I would be tempted someday to do something about I'm looking at doing a video on Henderson's proposed fleet. The ships Henderson wanted to build but didn't get built. And if I do that, I will then do a theme, and I'll do Stalin's proposed fleet, pre-war and post-war, and all sorts of things. That's my idea of things, of how sort of things I'd like to develop the channel going on. Looking at what could have been history, the counterfactual history, the not so much the what ifs, but the ones around that sort of scenario. But that's as time goes on. So, right then. The newest book in the collection that I'm going to show today. Come on, oldest book you own in terms of publication, first book you own, newest publication you own, and most also, what's the weirdest, wackiest book you own? Oh, good lord, those are long questions. Okay, oldest book I own in terms of publication is probably inherited from my great-grandfather. Published. No, it's not the oldest one by a long way. Actually, this one is one I inherited from my great-grandfather. It was published in 1931. I do have a 1928, though, going around here, and I think possibly a 1927 on order. It's supposed to arrive. Bressy's 1927. May have cost me an arm and leg. Wackiest book I own. Oh, that's just impossible. There are so many wacky books. And people buy me wacky books. But I have Clarkson's. Several of Clarkson's books. And newest publication you own. Newest publication I own at the moment is probably Warship 2020. Probably that one. But that one I didn't have to buy it. I got sent it to review. I own lots of books which are reprints of even older books as well. Lots and lots of books I own. Right. Carrying on with this. Incidents at Sea. Newest book today looking at. And this is American Confrontation and Cooperation with Russia and China, 1945 to 2016, by David F. Winkler. And I have checked, and no relation to the actor, which I found interesting. It's really, really cool book. And it's kind of a nice companion to Gunboat Diplomacy, But it tries to put an idea. It's what I call an idealistic approach to what is gunboat diplomacy versus a realistic approach to gunboat diplomacy. This is someone trying to look at it and tell the world it's getting better and nicer. And this is someone looking at the world and going, it's really not. So this is James Cable's Gunboat Diplomacy. This is Incidents at Sea by David F. Winkler. Both are very interesting to read, and it's quite a cool one to go through. Minority. Biggest problem in the UK after war was the manpower crisis of Navy. Yes. I've covered that in my book. That's what actually did for the battle class, really. The manpower crisis. If the manpower crisis hadn't been there, they would have probably been far more active than they were. Jerison, what about Britain's plans for a post-war fleet? Yeah, could do that. I've got the book, Rebuilding the Royal Navy. Yeah. Bruno 101. How many bottles of Iron Brew have you been through? Quite a lot. Take care, Arson. Yeah, worth it? I'm not sure why it's $90.95 for paperback. I think someone saw it earlier for $18.99, and honestly, I've procured it for a lot less. I procured mine copy came in at about £16, so I think you should be able to find it for a decent price somewhere. I would say about £20-25, definitely worth it. Less than that, exceptionally worth it. All right. A lead on the Soviet would have been the BC large cruisers rather than their Cold War cruiser production, coming with a longer range and room for upgrades to presence. The Sveldov class are actually a fairly good post-World War II version of what the Germans were trying to achieve with the Panzerchief. So I would say that they're heading into that direction. And how do naval staff officers differ from naval staff officers? How are they trained, and how do the Royal Navy staff officers compare to officers of the German General Staff? They do still go to staff college. They have to have had sea time and all things, but they still have staff training and staff experience. That's the whole reason for Greenwich. I would say they compare very well with their German counterparts. It's just, look, you get a lot of, for want of a better word, fetishization of the German military post-World War II. Especially the idea that the German military was in some ways winning against the huge horde of the Soviet Union, because that's what a lot of NATO staff officers were looking for information about after when the Cold War started. So you have an ongoing process where the German military does get really enamored with, and they get to rewrite and write their own history. The reality is they weren't as great as some of their marketing would say, have you believe. The proposal. Well, I just bought. I presume that's the Soviet one. Warship 2020 is a exercise. Give me this. Why no full screen video? Because today I wanted to do my phone's basically phone basically had battery issues, so that's why I'm running it through the laptop. So I did do one thing. Hello. Now, Bru Ships 2020 is mostly about various parts on the beginnings, or various historical articles. It's a Warship 2020 is a very nice collection of different papers. I have to say I have some problems with them, but I have done a book review of this earlier in the series of Bru Ships. I think it's in number 1 or number 2, Bru Ships. I go through it. Oh, good lord. That's heavy lifting. Right then. Pum pum. And so, Done those books. All right, next one. Air Defense at Sea by Rear Admiral J.R. Hill. And this is really, really cool. And mine comes with added lovely notes from Michael Clapp sitting in here. This is why occasionally I loan people books. I get notes back from them, added in the book, which has ideas for how it could be better improved. Really rather provide interesting commentary, and it's very difficult to cite in academic papers, which is why I don't do it. But it is worthwhile. This book is really, really good if you want to understand the realities of Cold War air defense at sea and the true realities, not the myth, not the ideas, not the projections in the movies, not the people who want to jump on about things and go, my particular super weapon is the best in the world, yours is terrible, you will never win, so therefore why bother? This is a true in-depth analysis by a really, really great naval officer, and it's worthwhile looking at. He also, I think, from memory, goes on to have a career at Oxford. So he's sort of a latter-day Herbert Richmond, but unlike Herbert Richmond, I actually have time for this one. Dr. Clark, Gunboat Diplomacy, 1999 to 1991, 64.99 paperback on Amazon. That would not surprise me. But it's Gunboat Diplomacy, 1919 to 1979 that I have James Cable's. I think he did produce an updated version, but honestly, I would just go with the 79 one. It teaches you everything, and it's usually a lot cheaper. Hey, General, take care. Jeff Beale, did the Soviets really try to buy an illustrious class carrier from UK? No, they didn't. It's a myth, but it's a good myth. Martin Doherty, it looks like that'll be why von Marstein got to do his revisionist history of the war in the East and even restart the West German army. Yep. It's France wrong. How was France developing its navy post-Cold War? Beyond the completion of the ships slipped off ship, and it's interesting. It's something which I would want to do a full video on the French. The French are quite a random force. Come on, thanks, Dr. Clark. I'll add it to the next Amazon order along with Forgotten Guns and Tanks on the 1920s. It seems very good. Good, I'd recommend it, honestly. Stafford Thompson, Dr. Clark, didn't navies not learn from US Air Force in Nam about sending guns and not just missiles? No, unfortunately, they didn't. Because the Navy's missiles are that much bigger, so they presume they were that much better. Right then. Soviet naval diplomacy. This is a little older. It's edited by Bradford Dismukes and James McConnell. And it has chapters written by McConnell, Peterson, Shlusky, Roberts, Dismukes, of course. It is one of the best books you can read to try and understand what the Soviet Union was doing at sea, how they were acting, and it's published in collaboration with the Center for Naval Analysis at the University of Rochester. Okay, it is Soviet naval diplomacy. It is published by Permagon Policy Studies, and it's a wonderful book. It is a really interesting read, and it has lots of really great details and data in there, which I highly recommend. Highly recommend this book. Plus, it's quite cheap secondhand, I know from personal experience. Oh. Jeff Beeler enjoyed the multitasking. Emin, if the Japanese had stayed out World War II, how would they have reacted to Stalin's fleet build-up? Panic. Nick Walters. Well, later Type 22s got their guns back. Yes, the batch freeze. Good ships. Good ships. Steve White, trying to think of Soviet naval presence in the Sea of Japan during Korean War. Yeah, they would have had a big impact on various forces. Shumak, there are quite a lot of myths about the C version of the Phantom has a better record than the E model with the central, the external gun. Internal gun, probably. June 190. What do you think of the Plan Z battleships? Just got the German Tier 10 in World Warships. Kind of want to hear what you think about it. Right then, let's find my Plan Z battleships paper. I have it somewhere. I can also smell cooking. That's just terrible cruelty. My family is now being very, very cruel. Now, so my interpretation of them has always been that they're enhanced Bismarck class, that they are trying to make them better and go better, but I don't see them as being that great an idea, because they are trying to build a battleship which can be a surface raider like a Deutschland class. Once you're at that size, doing surface raider duties, you either are a battle cruiser or you're going to be part of a task force, or at least you should be. And I honestly don't see the Germans getting task forces to sea that well. They get Scharnhorst and Gneisenau out, which is pretty much of a fluke. But then if you look at the rest of the war, every time they get out, they're being followed. They either have a battle at the beginning or they're getting followed. And then you've got the Battle of North Cape, where basically Scharnhorst gets bushwhacked by Duke of York and some rather nasty Royal Navy cruisers and destroyers who do not understand the concept of this is a battleship fight. And the cruisers and destroyers are going, yes, and we're in it. But they're nice ships. I think if you're playing around with them in what's it called? World of Warships, you're going to have fun with them. They're for World of Warships, and considering the metrics they have there, and as I understand it from what Drac has explained it to me, because he has actually played it, whereas I just listen to him and go, cool, because I've been finishing off books, so I have been banned from computer games. If I ever do miss one of these videos, you'll know it's because the computer game machine is back, and I am miles deep in catching up on computer games from the last 18 months. But that wouldn't happen, don't worry. But they are interesting. Are there any books on? Oh, thank you for food and brew. Those are useful things, actually. Those are quite essential things. They are very essential things. So, I have 2 more books today. So don't let me forget those by getting distracted by questions. Carhaman, are there any books on the modern RN you would recommend? On the modern Royal Navy, I'd recommend. Oh, no. I'd say a subscription to Warships International Fleet Review is your best option if you want something about the modern Royal Navy. And that's not just because I write things for them. They are a lovely magazine, and I know Ian Ballantyne. Ian Ballantyne does do some good books. Yeah, if you can find Ian Ballantyne's modern stuff on the Royal Navy, I haven't got a copy of his book here with me. It's been borrowed by someone else. But he does good books on modern Navy. And a guy called... a guy who runs a blog called The Pinstripe Line, and another blog called Save the Royal Navy. Those are 2 very good blogs for Royal Navy stuff. Usually I consider one incredibly positive from the government's perspective and one incredibly positive from the... Well, no, one's slightly positive from the government's perspective and one is slightly negative on the whatever the government's saying. And usually I draw the line somewhere in the middle of them. But they're both good. What's your delicious, tasty dinner? I think it's chipolata sausages. At least that's what I got out of the fridge. Mm-hmm. And Nick Wall, the Plan Z stuff was too big for their yards, wasn't it? Drac was talking about this the other night. The Plan Z stuff was too big for their capacity to produce armor, in my opinion. Let alone their yards. They had ideas for it, and it's nice. If peace had continued, yes, you could have scaled up. Under peacetime conditions, you could have probably scaled up and you could have probably built them, especially when you've got a totalitarian dictatorship which doesn't care about how much money it's spending. But the reality is, in wartime, it ain't going to happen. Second one, how is Port of Vladivostok navigated? Could it build? Again, you're dealing with a dictatorship. They would have made facilities to build them. Well, how well they'd have built them is a different matter. Jeff Ealer, what plans did the Soviets have for a fleet train? That's a more interesting question, which is pretty much something I would get into. It's France's fault. I agree. I never like the pictures of hypothetical things because they're always better than they really would be. That is the usual truth. And Shomak, they had to put a smaller radar in the E to fit the gun, and there are quite a lot of incidents of Air Force pilots being surprised by MiGs. Dr. Hans Clark. I'm currently reading British Carrier Strike Fleet after 1945. It is fantastic. Book is fantastic. So, next to the books today. I've given you the fleet about what could have been. This is the fleet what was. Norman Palmer's The Naval Institute Guide to the Soviet Navy, 5th edition. I don't think there is a 6th edition. I'm not sure. There might be. If there is, I've missed it. But this is the 5th edition. And I love it. It is a very, very fun book to have. And it has all sorts of things in here. It explains naval infantry. It explains command structures. It's basically a ABCD guide of the Soviet Navy. And it is wonderful to read. It's got plans. It's got pictures. It even has a lovely picture of Norman Palmer himself, which is quite a cool picture. And it is just massive. It's everything I wish sometimes Jane's would be. It has all their aircraft. It has all their submarines. And it has a lot of potentials in there and explanations of what things are and why they're doing it. It is very much a Cold War produced book, but it's worthwhile reading for that reason, because you get both the Soviet Navy as appreciated by the Allies and also, the Allies' appreciation of the Soviet Navy. And you can infer a lot about what the Allies are thinking from what the Allies are thinking the Soviets are thinking, which is quite cool. And you can see a certain, how do I put this? If you're looking at current Russian designs, you can certainly see their forebears if you go through this. It is a lovely, lovely book, and it is, frankly, it's amazing. It's really cool. Dr. Clark, how useful would modernized arrows have been in a full neonuclear war in the 80s? Do you think it would likely they would actually get into a gun range of a valuable target? Doubtful at sea, but of land targets, more than likely. I have a feeling they'd have been heavily used in Norway and other fights like that. Joe Richardson, how long have you been writing this book? World of Warships has been out for like 5 years now. Okay, so the thing is, I started researching the book probably about 4 years ago. It took me 2 different publishers. It's been through. One publisher, it got all done, sent to them, and I went, we don't want to do this anymore. It's got too many footnotes in it and too many academic stuff. We just want a plain book. Because I wanted to produce something which was both easy to read, but also something which would have academic level of research quality behind it. I wanted to straddle that divide. So it would be something which could be a book which someone could pick up when they are 13, 14 years old and love the subject, and take them right the way through their university years and still be able to use it. That's what I wanted. And yeah, that's what I ended up getting to produce. But it's been fun. But it's been quite a struggle, and so I have been sort of ignoring a lot of things going on around me for a fair number of time now. And by the time World of Warships got really big enough that it was percolating and people were telling me it's quite good, that was about 18 months ago. Prior to that, I'd been, don't take this the wrong way, but as a naval historian who spent his entire life with his head in that space, I didn't want to end up in there if it wasn't good. And I was just going, ooh, because I would have just spent my time complaining, sending them notes and everything. That's not right. You've got the torpedoes wrong. And I'm a bit annoyed because I hear you can't do night actions with torpedoes, and that's just cruel. At the moment. New IKB 4.2. I do wonder if the Plan Z stuff is just the naval architects just trying to make their make work to avoid being sent to the Ostfront. Never. Giuseppe, hey, hello. Hope I didn't mangle your name too much. Dr. Clark, have you heard of the Pojana class corvettes that are to be built? If you have, what do you think of them now? Should they be called frigates instead? Let's have a look just to make sure I'm getting the correct one, because I think I know what they are. And I think I know which navy they are. But I always want to check because the joy of being dyslexic. They are, of course, one of my favorite navies. I have a real thing for the Finnish, the Danish, and the Norwegian and the Swedish navies. I think, frankly, our friends of the Scandinavian persuasion do produce some beautiful-looking ships. I would say, in the nicest way, they are at the light frigate corvette area, and I would go looking for them. I do like these ones. There are, believe it or not, some vessels being muted for Vietnam, which have a similar name spelling, which is why I wanted to check out. Right. Now, the thing is, they get into the whole displacement debate of whether or not they're a frigate or a corvette because of displacement. I would say the actual design I would call for a frigate versus a corvette these days is I would call a corvette a small multi-role ship. A frigate is a small anti-submarine warfare ship. A destroyer is a large anti-air ship, to an extent, possibly general purpose, but I would usually call a cruiser, a large general purpose ship, to be a cruiser. That's how I sort of mentally design them off my head. And so I like them. And I think they're perfectly sized for what the Finnish want to do, because that's the trouble. The reason the ships are growing in size is because we want to do so much with them. And the idea that always comes out is, well, for the same tonnage, we can produce 4 or 5 smaller ships. Yes, but then you would have to equip those ships with 4 or 5 of those radars. You'd have to buy 4 or 5 engine sets. And for the same size ship, same amount of tonnage, you'd have far more space taken up by engines, far more space taken up communications gear, by living quarters, by all those things because of that. And you have less of the teeth bit in that overall. Yes, you'd have 5 ships, but they'd be less well armed. And that's always your balancing act. You have to work it out. This doesn't mean you should always build supersized ships. No. You can go too big. But you have to work it out and think it through. And think what suits you in this particular occasion and what you're building. Just for a kicker, would you be open to doing a reaction video to... I am not sure. Stafford Thompson, if you can send that to me on Discord, I'll have a look at it. Kevin McTaggart, do I see a book and iron brew on the do I see a book, an Iron Brew, on the white book as next to the horizontal books? There are lots and lots of books around here. There are lots of books on various topics. There is possibly you're seeing this, which is the box. My glass came in. Always got to have a brew glass for Brian Brew properly. Do you know one item? Adolf Clock. Had the British Navy kept Vanguard or one of Nelson's, would they ever make them into cruise missile batteries? They wouldn't keep the Nelsons, but Vanguard maybe. Carl Harmon. When some museums driven, can we get a video of you going around one? That's pretty much cruel to the museum, but possibly. I may have been banned a couple of times from a certain museum, a very big museum, which I'm not allowed to say it banned me because they've now said they won't ever ban me again. But every time I go there, I might have to tell them in advance because I might get followed around by someone taking notes because I have a habit of correcting their displays loudly to their faces. In a very polite way. But a particular Falklands War exhibit was absolutely terrible. And called themselves. Sorry. It's a personal bugbear at a particular museum. SMP, could you suggest a book which describes how the RN influenced the treaties to get the stuff the RN wanted sneakily? No, because the best book on the treaties, Washington Warships After Washington, written by John Jordan, pretty much goes through with the idea that the treaties were bad for the Royal Navy entirely. And misses the point that the reason the Royal Navy weren't necessarily bucking the treaties was because they got them written for them. But that's still the best book going on the treaties, and it's still very much worth a read. It's just seems to have the idea the British on it are more honest than everyone else, when actually I would say the British are just a bit more manipulative with the treaties than everyone else. Snowmac, it's a trade-off. Guns should be on a multi-role aircraft, but they're wasteful and pure fighters like the F-22. I'm not sure. See, nicest way. I like having a gun on the F-22 just in case it has to engage something which, frankly, is too small to bother with a gun. Refuse. Dust Clock. What do you think of India's current arms upgrade plan? Considering the sheer number of threats they've got and how they've got to deal with it, they're doing quite well. But they're going to have to. They're having to make compromises because the sheer number of threats they have. Huge land borders, huge maritime borders, sitting at a nexus of global trade, and everyone would like them. Oh, and they've got huge potential wars over water supply coming their way. Yeah. If I was India, I would be paranoid as at the moment. Stafford Thompson, Jimmick, agree, which is why I'd like to see someone who knows the material's opinion on the matter. Personally, I think the video and song are both done well. I'll, as I said, send it to me on the thing. Find a book I already have. That's good. Martin Doherty, Saves Your Bangla. Naval Institute 5th edition, £237.93 on Amazon, £189. It didn't cost me that much, but might have cost me roughly £100 when I got it. So, I got mine from eBay though. I do a lot. I have very strong Google foo when it comes to finding books. Very, very strong Google foo. Nick Walders, Showmac, I bet they'd get some pushback from Air Force in general, and pilots in particular if they tried to. Yeah. Brad Pittler, cringe at the publisher saying too many footnotes. Keep finding good night. Will do. Thank you very much. I do. I have lots of fights with them over these things. And luckily, I'm now with my favourite publisher, who I didn't go with in the first place. And they have been wonderful. And they are lovely. And they have put up with me being delayed by all sorts of things because of COVID-19 and having to deal with all the surging work and all sorts of random stuff that's come my way. And they've been really lovely. So Pen and Sword get big thumbs up from me. I know they don't always have there are people out there who will trash them, but they have been absolutely lovely as far as an author is experience for me. So I'm very happy with them. I think sometimes Soviet naval threat was played up for greater appropriations. That's a real threat. I think the reality is the potential Soviet threat was massive. The reality was slightly less so. Stephen Wilson, second-hand bookshops take more than a time, but can provide some bargains. They do. Lee Furno Books down in Tavistock, really, really good. Really love them. I stop in down there every time I'm going down to Cornwall, and I come out with a lot of money spent. Lee Furno Books. He does have an online presence, and you can send him emails. And it's amazing what he finds. He basically draws in from the whole of the Southwest any books going on all sorts of topics. I used to have to send academic books to be pulped when I worked in a charity shop. See my... Sean, if you can use the space for infrared search and track, it would be more useful than a gun. Yeah, maybe. Stafford Thompson, Dr. Clark. So the photo I shared on Discord or in Iowa next to a squad of frigates was that? Yeah, pretty much. Eamon, what is Iron Brew and can I get it in California? It is a traditional Scottish fizzy drink, which is basically the Scottish equivalent of Coke. It doesn't taste anything like Coke. There is nothing else which tastes like it in the world. And it's just lovely. And as both me and Drac are addicts. Wouldn't any Soviet large surface fleet have moved NATO forces to move towards more submarines, mines, and air denial weapons? Depends. You see, if the Soviet Navy was always coming up with the idea of trying to base itself around the world. So if you have a larger Soviet fleet and you have it more deployable, you'll probably find that there'll be ships outside of the nearest spheres of influence when war starts. So yeah, in the nicest way, whilst you might want to establish a barrier with mines, with torpedo, with submarines and all these things, a sort of sea denial minefield in a way to stop them, you're going to also have to go around the world finding the stuff which is already out there, especially if they have supply dumps in places like Cuba and various African nations. It's reading this and finding out how close they got to some African nations being very, very pro them is makes it interesting if they'd had a larger navy. Richard Hughes, you correct them. Yes, I do in museums. Although, to be fair, luckily my girlfriend is also a historian, and so they tend to get double corrected if we're both there together. Which is why we went to Belfast for Valentine's Day, because HMS Belfast is actually fine, and we go around it and we love that one. Jerison, I cannot possibly comment. Hi, Nan Heron Productions. Bishop, London Treaty was bad for America because the RN wanted to downsize to 14-inch guns. No. Only Chatfield really wanted to downsize to 14-inch guns. Only Chatfield, really. And so, Surgeon, I just bought Gunboat Diplomacy 1919 to 1979 for £24. Given the other high prices for the book, I figured I'd buy now. Yes, we see the 1919 to 1979 one is the older version. It's still got everything in there, barring the years 1980 to 1991. So you miss 12 years, and it usually saves about 80 quid. The book makes its case with 60 years worth of history. It doesn't need the extra 12 odd years. Really doesn't. It's lovely to have it. If you have the money, get it and enjoy it. But if not, don't worry. And it's a lot cheaper as a rule. Ooh. If the off chance it did find itself in gun range, what would IO's guns actually do to a modern warship? Shred it. Literally. They wouldn't probably blow up inside it. They'd probably pass straight through it. So they'd shred it. Kinetic kill would be what would be going on. A Russian returns to Syria to their Cold War bases, Cuba, Venezuela too. Yes, Carl, they have. I'll be back in a second. Got 2 more books to go. Hey, I come. That was a fun one. So, Shulmac, I've just read your 40k meme. Fun, very funny. So, Jermac, I just reminded myself, Soviet naval strength was difficult to quantify during Cold War. Also because USSR had a lot of small ships built in inland shipyards and moved them by rivers and canals. Yeah, that was always fun. IKB 4772, I'm jealous. Jermac, Jive Turkey pointed out that today the Chinese also built their submarines inland on Yangtze and Huinong riverbanks. Yeah, they do all sorts of things in there. Right. So, next one. Superpower maritime strategy in the Pacific. It's often forgotten, and it's one of the most interesting things in that when you talk to people about the Cold War, they immediately start talking to you about Europe. And I immediately go, well, it was a global war, and stuff was happening in Africa, stuff was happening in South America, stuff was happening in the Pacific and in the Indian Ocean. This is edited by Frank C. Langdon and Douglas A. Ross. And it is another beautiful book and another collection of some really interesting things. It's got Mashika Sada, Trevor Finley, Ross Babbage, James T. Tritton, Charles A. McCunnis and Michael D. Wallace, Nicholas Banning Garrett, Bonnie Glasner, Alistair Johnson, Yoshidi Soya, John Lamb, and Andrew Mack. It is really, really worth getting, and it wasn't that expensive. I managed to get it. I think I've got an extra library copy, Wilfrid Laurier University library copy, which came in to be about £10. I'm not sure how much it is at the moment. Airman, 14-inch guns for the KGVs did just fine. Yes, but it would be logistically and every other way far easier to keep with a 15-inch. Everything would have made life easier with a 15-inch, and if Henderson had his way, they would have had 4 treble 15-inch turrets. That was pretty much what he wanted to do. Give them 12, 15-inch guns. And he'd worked out a way that they could do it. Admittedly, it involved lying a bit, but you know, it wasn't so much bothered about that. By the time they were building the KGVs, honestly, no one was really so much bothered about that. Juicy Susan was working during last live video, so I got to ask here: how many KGV build slots would you trade in 1940 for tribals? Well, you see, by 1940 it's a bit late for the tribals. There's better designs available. If I could have traded them in 1938 and 1939 for more slot, so if I could have built them 36, 37, and had them coming out 38, 39, I would have. But if 1940, if I've been trading for it, I would have gone for the L70s, and I'd have built them, which would have been the really big L-class destroyers, which Henderson was after. And honestly, for the cost of a KGV, I could have probably built 20 of them. And I would have done it quite shamelessly. Happily. 20. I only 1 KGV less, but I would have got 20 of the tribals. 20 of not the tribals, the L and the 70s. Yeah, Bijon, June of 1941 and 19 Juno 191. I do agree. I think you're correct. The KGVs were not perfect, good enough, and served very well. I would say it's not their main arm, which is a problem, but I would have preferred. It's logistically, I would have preferred them to have 15-inch guns mainly. Stafford Thompson at C. Clark. It was briefly mentioned on bilge pumps. May I ask your thoughts on Russians failing in modernizing Peter the Great? Okay, so the Peter Veliki is a lovely potential ship. Basically, for Russia to have global presence, they need something which requires minimal support, logistical support from home, and hopefully keeps going. In which case, nuclear-powered cruiser is their only option until they can build something, and they can't really build anything at the moment. So keeping that upgraded and working makes sense. But to make it really viable, you would need to do a lot of work on its sensors and its weaponry. It's getting the caliber upgrade missiles and all these things, which is good set. That's good stock of missiles. But I would think it needs to have actually been in service by now for it to be useful and still have a good operational life ahead of it. Because I'm wondering how much of a... Let's put it this way. I am thinking that if I had had a ship this long out of water, then if I was the Royal Navy in the 18th century, the 1700s or sort of 1800s sort of period, I would be expecting that this ship had been completely rebuilt. And the trouble is, all I'm hearing about a piece of Licky is it hasn't been completely rebuilt. It is definitely not been completely rebuilt. So it's still got the same hull in large chunks that it was built with, and that thing's got a nuclear reactor in it. I would prefer if unless you want to be very embarrassed, I would have done a lot of work on it if the time it's been able to work. Amen. Was there enough resources to lay down Vanguard Keel in 37, 38 and have been completed in 42, 43, if not earlier? No, they were building KGVs. If they'd not been building KGVs, they could have built a Vanguard. That's the thing. John Luke, given the land-based nature of the Soviet Union, a large service fleet would almost be entirely deployed to forward locations. How do you ascend and there's still a strong RN have countered this? By having a lot of forward deployed ships around the world. Nighthand Productions. Sorry, I'm not certain with the discussions currently on, but my ears picked up Soviet influence Africa. Nighthand Production. I'm not familiar with the whole episode, but didn't we Brits pull out of Aden as they wanted to move towards the Soviets? If so, what would the Soviets' degree of influence in Aden? The Soviets had influence all around the world and were trying to build it up. They had communist groups and various local factions they were supporting and getting involved in. If you read this book, and this one, you will find Africa and Asia comes up all over the place, as does South America. And it all comes down to this guy. Sea Power of the State by S.G. Gorshkov, the other book, which is really worth reading. And you realize that a lot of Soviet naval diplomacy, when you read through the line, read between the lines of this, is about making the West have to watch its rear. That they are not too sure, they are not 100% sure about their rear, that those nations might be beneficiently neutral towards the Soviets rather than to the Allies, by doing a lot of diplomatic actions going on around the world and a lot of involvement and a lot of presence. Basically, the Soviet Union picks up and they chart a course which I would call half German risk fleet surface radar, half Royal Navy naval diplomacy. And that's what they're charting a path between. That is what they're trying to achieve. They're trying to achieve the image of being a far more global, far more powerful nation than they are by turning up all sorts of places using their fleet. And also to threaten the Allies with the fact that we could be fighting a war in Europe, but also fighting one in the Pacific and fighting one in the ocean, because there could be Soviet submarines there could be surface ships, there could be all sorts of things somewhere there, which we could have to deal with. So that was the problem. And how badly were armoured carriers delayed by the fall of France? They weren't delayed by the fall of France. They were delayed by the fact that the British had decided to stop building pretty much the surface of big ships, because they thought A, the war would be over too quickly for them to go involved, and B, they would have to focus on small escorts. Sergei Gloskov. Almost got caught out by the thing there. Sergei Gloskov. The Sea Power of the State. It's very worth a read. It's got lovely maps. It's got all sorts of things in. And if you want to understand one of the most powerful men in the world for good on 40-odd years, it's worthwhile reading his book. And he also talks about aircraft carriers a lot. It's responsible. It's unfortunate that folks still fall in the trap of bigger guns and better guns. Yes. Please note, I'm not saying that the 14-inch was necessarily a very bad gun. I'm saying that we had a working treble turret already, and that 15-inch guns fitted better with the British logistics footprint than 14-inch, because we already had a couple of ships with 16-inch, but most of the rest of the fleet already used 15-inch. So if by going 14-inch, you introduce a third supply of ammunition, a third supply of this, and all the complexities. It would have been just so much easier to keep with the 15-inch from a logistics point of view, standardized on logistics. I was listening to Dry Dock today, the 101, and the whole potential battle cruiser Leopard, let's call it a Leopard class battle cruiser, as Drac also decided to join and call it. The whole idea, the advantage on that for the Royal Navy is it standardizes on the 15-inch gun that much quicker. And I think that would be the sensible thing, to standardize on the 15-inch gun, because it would have made the logistics so much easier from the fleet's perspective. John Luke, would a large Soviet service fleet have pushed Allied carriers to move to nuclear strike and sea roll? US and America being built to float around on nuclear surface ship action units? Probably not. Honestly, they'd have probably won the battles, but there would have been more battles around the world. And USS America, not really. It's just, no, I don't think that would have got built. Nick Water, how many destroyers would you like? Yes. Lots more. Daniel Robinson, hi, do you feel Iran's goal today should be to maintain a global status quo and enable trade? Also, train set status updates. Well, the train set, I actually haven't managed to do much work since I last spoke about it on I think it was Tuesday. But is getting there, and I have now fixed all but one set of points, but it's going to have to wait till I get my new soldering iron, because my old soldering iron has finally given up the ghost. And that's coming in at some point in the next month or so to actually come in, and then I should have the outer line fixed, and then I'll clean this all again, and then I'll start building buildings, and then it'll be going, and all the trains are running quite happily. The N gauge is lovely. The OO gauge, HO gauge is now needing a lot of work. I'm going to have to spend some time on that one at some point. Johnny, I cannot help with as for the RN's global state. Yes, honestly, maintaining global status quo does the UK every favour. That's what our economy is set up around and to organise. So jumping into that without that is silly. And the reason I am starting this is because a lot of people keep commenting about. Oh, on Discord. So, I'm just sorting out something. Those who are on Discord will know there's a new sort of title sort of thing being established called the Killick, which is a and it's basically a reward for people who are contributing very well to the Discord, who have been keeping very polite, keeping it sort of a polite and beneficial debate going on the Discord naval history. And it's been some great stuff going on there. We do now have a steam train section, as well as a bilge pumps and the video section. Anyway, so we've got given the new sort of title of Killick to people as sort of a reward. So there's the flotilla leaders, who are actually Drac and Jamie are two of them as well. And we sort of are talking away, and the flotilla leaders are the ones who are the administrators who make sure dare to keep the code of conduct going. But we have the Killicks as an award, and it's going up. Lots of people getting more Killick today. I was asking, would equipping Nelson Rodney with triple 15-inch save enough tonnage to give them better machinery and result higher speed? Probably. Vision. Why was Admiral Chatfield so big on a 14-inch instead of staying with what Ryan had? Once again, 15-inch was great and problems with 16-inch were worked out. Why did the US agree to 14-inch? Okay. Because they all thought that if you made guns smaller, you could make battleships to the point at which they would survive. They would be impossible to sink. The idea was, if everyone's got 14-inch guns and we're all building to the same maximum tonnage, all our ships will be pretty much exactly the same, and no one will have an advantage of ship design. Yep, that's going to work. Do you know what, I was going to ask about Admiral Kuznetsov, but after hearing Dr. Clark shudder at the thought of Peter the Great, I don't think so. Kuznetsov is a carrier produced by committee, and Kuznetsov is honestly not that great in terms of their global reach because they can't replace it, they can't repair it properly, they can't do any of the stuff they need to do. In the nicest way, poor Kuznetsov. The thing is, people keep asking me, why does the Royal Navy need two carriers when France has been talking about having just one carrier and made that big statement? Well, France has one aircraft carrier, but it has 3 LHDs, Mistral class, so it has 4 aviation ships, which means if it's not, without a carrier, yes, it loses carrier strike, but it still has attack gunships, it still has helicopter lift. The Royal Navy just has 2. So if one of its ships is in for refit, which carriers do need to do because they are very complicated, very advanced assets which do need major refits, you then have one left, one available. That's the thing, how you can govern it. So France can afford, of course, to say, make the big headline, we only want one aircraft carrier, because we have 3 LHDs. So we can afford to go by one. Britain, which doesn't have any LHDs, doesn't have an LPH, only has 2 carriers, can't afford to, because they need to go and refit. And if you want an example of what happens to a fleet carrier which doesn't have a second one, may I introduce you to Russia with Kuznetsov. And admittedly, it was a bad design in the first place. It was badly built. It was badly engineered. But again, without when it has to be constantly be used because it's the only option and doesn't get properly maintained, you have this stuff happen. And Alan, good afternoon, Doctor. Don't know if you ever touched on this, but have been having quite a discussion about the Alaska versus Scharnhorst. You take on the pair? Alaska versus Scharnhorst. It's an interesting question. It's an interesting question because you have the Alaskas are fairly big for cruisers. They are very big for cruisers. They are sometimes nicknamed battle cruisers, but I would never call them that. I'd call them cruisers. And the Scharnhorst, well, luckily there has been a whole lot of discussions going on about this quite recently, and I have been reading them. My thinking is this. It will go to who gets the first shot in and who gets the first salvo to land. In which case, the Alaska class have actually decent gunnery radars, and therefore, in a one-on-one fight, I'm thinking the Alaska wins. I'm sorry, this is the thing. If the fight carries on for a very long time, maybe the armor of the Scharnhorst now gives them the advantage. But I don't think it gives them enough of an advantage, and I don't think they get the first rounds on as quickly. I think Alaska, with radar controlled for a gunnery, especially if it's anything less than perfect with visual weather, gets the first round, second round, third round, and fourth round hits. And by the time Scharnhorst and Eisenhower starts getting impact, they've already suffered a huge amount of damage. Because let's say one of those first few hits takes out the director control for the Scharnhorst and Eisenhower. Not unlikely, because those are some of the most exposed parts. So I think it goes to the Alaskas. It's the reason I have that knowledge over Peter Velicki is because Peter Velicki and I have a ongoing, how do I put this? Every time Peter Velicki decides to sail around the world, I seem to end up getting a phone call to either write an article, comment on an article, or be on a television program, on a news broadcast, discussing what its impact is around the world and how it's having an effect on naval diplomacy and why the Russians are deploying it. And so I keep a track on it because it helps me chart out when I'm going to need to have some time free so I can earn some more money. Mainly for my book addiction, which we've already discussed today, and this whole entire series is about, basically. Angus Asano, reading between the lines sounds a lot like contemplating and interpreting nuances of what was written. That is exactly what you do with this, but mainly remember that's because this version is a translation in English. Gorshkov wrote it in Russian, so A, it's got the translator's perspective on it, and B, it's another Pergman Press production like this one is, and they are very interesting to read. Mondorty, Duck Clock, Sea Power Estates, £30.60 to £130.60 on eBay. £30.60. Definitely go for £30.60. That's far more in the region of sensible spending. Common Gasman, KGV, a third major caliber in 2 new turret types. Yes. Yeah, it is Zumwalt syndrome, as you said. It is. It's basically, it's just asking for complexity. You should have, at least they should have gone for the triple turrets. Even if 9 guns rather than 10, it would have still been better. Bananora, how would Soviet naval diplomacy change if they had been given 1 or 2 RN light fleet carriers and had kept them? Oh, you'd have seen far more task force operations sailing around the world. But the Royal Navy wasn't going to hand over any fleet carriers at all to the Soviets. They were not. Basically, the only way they'd have got it is if you'd somehow elected a Labour government which actually was keen on that idea. And honestly, none of the Labour governments were keen on that idea either. Dr. Clark, glad the hairy doorkeeper's been walked. I agree totally about standardizing heavy weaponry. The USN did that before most of us. Yes, it's sensible. It's good logistics and training and all sorts of things. In nicest way, if I've got one type of guns, I only have, and one type of mounts, I can supply and fix and maintain those easily. Half the problems with the KGV of implementing them could have been solved if they'd been using 15-inch treble turrets. Okay? The stuff would have been solved before they even got into trouble, into the service. They would have had so much things dealt with. Eamon, what type of locomotives do you have and what period modelling? I'm doing my own take roughly on the Cornish Riviera in the 1930s. On the Cornish end of the Cornish Riviera. So I've got Hall class, I've got a 262 and an 060 panniers, 2 tank engines. So, and 2 Hall class locomotives. They're fun. What's your favourite locomotive? Of the ones I own, it's probably between my Flying Scotsman, my Silver Jubilee in my OHO gauge, and it was the first Hall class which I bought for my little N gauge line. I love the second one as well I got, but the first one's going to have always have a special place in my heart because that was the first N gauge engine I procured, and it's lovely. And actually, just pick it up a second. This is my little Hall class N gauge engine. She's cute. Managed to collect quite a lot of dust today because I've been sorting out books. So dust has been going everywhere and is all over the tracks as well. So that's going to be a fun cleaning job. But these things are fun. Right then. John Luke, could Vanguard's 15-inch armor have killed an Iowa one-on-one? It did have more armor than an Iowa. If I would, in honesty, say it would again depend on who got the first hits in. 15-inch versus 16-inch, there isn't that much difference between them. It would be a lot of interesting debates, but it would only be sorted out with an actual fight, and it would be whoever got the first hits in. A lot of these ships are much of a muchness, okay? And they had to be treated as that. Plus, they both had, I think, the same director systems for their secondary armor, which would be quite interesting. Now, hammer reduction. Okay, we've established that you think it'd be better to have lose KGV for 20 tribals. Well, no, I said 20 L70s, not tribals, because as I said, by this point, by 1940, the tribals are the the tribals are the old design. There's an L70 ready to go, and that gets what turned into the battle class, and then eventually the daring class. What else in the 30s, 40s RM would you do away with in exchange for something else? Hope that question makes sense. Ooh. If I could get some more aircraft carriers built, probably if I could get Ark Royal built with a sibling, and I could increase the flow of armored carriers, 1 or 2, so that we had more new carriers that are coming online at the beginning of World War II, I would be really, really happy. What I'd build them instead of, possibly another King George, probably King George V class, because I could use the outfitting docks to refit some of the other vessels. I'd also be tempted to actually refit the the D class and the C class quicker with their AA armament, and build more towns rather than didos. But that's just me. That would be just me, that sort of thing, but that's what I would be tempted to do. Sure, Mike, that's the clock. Sorry, I haven't been super active. My laptop broke down. It's been in repair as we speak. Oh, well, don't worry, Sean, Mac. I hope it gets repaired soon. Do you think steam generators, in contrast to boilers, could have had a role as main engines in a ship? Potentially, but other things come online. You see, the trouble is, by the time steam generators reach the point at which they're really efficient for those sort of things, there are other systems available which are better. So that's a problem. So the world powers were trying to block them. To an extent. Don Dorison, time for a new HMS Unicorn. Always time for a new HMS Unicorn. New IKB 472. Does the combined Kanzuk fleet have enough strength and sea lift capacity to retake Hong Kong and hold it? Ooh. Okay, if they all combined every single ship together and you had full air groups, you could possibly launch the operation, but honestly, you'd want the Americans long to have any chance of success. If you said, could the combined Five Eyes do it? Yes, the Five Eyes combined could. If they wanted to. But you would have to expect that the Chinese would respond in force and possibly with nuclear weapons. This is the thing. You can do it, but is it going to stay conventional? And, are there better things to do? Because really, the really important thing about Hong Kong is not the land, it's the people. What was that? Some of the phrases come out of America recently? The human capital? Well, the human capital is really what's important in Hong Kong. It's the people. And if the people start to leave it, then China's going to get into real trouble economically. Jefferson, hasn't Charles de Gaulle spent more time in dry dock than at sea at this point? There is certainly a running debate about that one. This one, UK is totally lacking any long-term strategic planning, as it costs the UK considerably. Yeah, it does. Welcome to my fate. I have to argue against this. Angus is on. How do you get USN? How do you only get by on less than half a dozen fleet carriers? Unfathomable. There we go. Start on the USN. Okay, the USN are just it's not fair. Gino 191. Dr. Clark, what doesn't help Kuznetsov is that it burned near a place with radioactive stuff. Yeah, that and many other things. Seems right. French squadrons trained on USS George Bush for weeks at work with USN squadrons, but after 8 months of refurbishment, they're back to the Charles de Gaulle. Yep. That's the thing. That's how they keep them going. Aegis King of Wolf laughs at Admiral Kuznetsov. Most size comparisons I see with it adds a tug on. Could be. I mean, quite fair. Always felt in poor weather night Alaska about that. And Alaska would want to keep it at 18 kilometers range or greater. Bumping into each other in the Baltic, other way around. In daylight, yes. Potentially. Trevor McCartney, does he who hits hit first or wins apply to Iowa versus Yamato? Again, yes, probably. It's going to sound strange. Once you're dealing with that level of firepower, if you get the first hit in, you're going to cause a lot of damage. Now, the odds are the things you're going to damage are going to be things which are going to be by necessity exposed, which are rangefinders, which are conning positions, which are all the things which have to be exposed in order to do their job. In which case, if you get the first hit, that's going to cause degradation of their options. So unless they're hit straight, they hit you in those positions straight afterwards, then your second salvo is going to hit, and your third salvo is going to hit. And then they might finally get a hit, but that's going to be only if they've still got things working to direct the hit. So this is the thing. When you're dealing with battleships, it very much quickly by the end of World War II, sort of heavy cruisers, etc., you are very much getting into territory where first hit will decide the fate of the battle. which is kind of reversed to, well, actually, it's sort of what happens with the Battle of the River Plate. We'll leave it on one side. Jerison, I know someone who used to work in MOD procurement. Every time a Russian squadron was in the channel, MPs would go nuts as to why we can only spare a single ship. Yes, and then they'd forget quite quickly afterwards. King George V, Alex, I've brought an Airfix 1350 HMS Illustrious model. Those are cool. I've got one downstairs I haven't built yet. Shulmac, they tried to give the Russians carrier possibly Henderson riven from a grave person. And I think in a nice way, if they tried to give the Russians a carrier, I don't think Henderson would necessarily be the one you had to worry about most. I have a feeling Cunningham would have caused war, but I also think Fraser. I'm sorry, I'm sorting out Iron Brew bottles. Fraser would have gone trouble, and the really interesting would have been the admiral in charge of First Carrier Squadron at this point, a guy called, and eventually in charge of the Fleet Air Arm as Fifth Sea Lord at this point, Admiral Sir Philip Vian. I have a feeling he would have gone thermonuclear on anyone who suggested it. That's why it didn't get any that far. Jerison, the Royal Navy handed over Archangels to the Soviets to find that it had never been used to the point where everything had been broken in place. Actually, it hadn't been maintained. The Royal Sovereign had been handed over, and it hadn't been maintained. They didn't have the maintenance facilities for it, so they tried to use it, but they couldn't maintain it and keep it going. Actually, conversely, the cruiser they gave them came back quite in quite good condition because they did have the facilities. They could maintain that. HMS King George V. KGV is fine. I don't want to get say I'm being terrible, but they are fine ships and they are good ships. I'm just saying that logistically, a 15-inch gun would have been a lot easier to deal with. Martin Doherty, Dr. Clark, what is your ideal numbers for RN escorts at present time? As 19 just doesn't seem enough, and how would you sell to the present day politicians? I have an entire movie on this. It's called the 4K subscribers, 4,000 subscribers thank you video. Go look at it. I go through it all, but basically I end up with roughly 25, maybe a bit more escorts. Okay. It goes up. I have the options for, well, I have the options for 25 to 30 escorts and how it will work out. Paul Johnson, is the Hall class Burton Angus Hall? I think one of them might be. Let me check her. No, this is Ravingham, and maybe the other one could be. But if I had the trains go around the track, it creates noise which the microphone picks up and gets very, very bad for anyone trying to listen. Because I did originally consider the idea of having the train going round and bringing the books to me, but it made so much noise it just didn't work, and it didn't like it. Arrington, 284 Berkshire Locust is the best looking, hands down. It's wonderful. It's a staggering number of MPs that talk about armed forces but lack any understanding. They're politicians. It's what most politicians do in life. They talk about a lot of things. For Thompson, that's Clark. Which Flying Scotsman? I think there have been about 3, hasn't there? 4472. Vision, Ammonton. I like the New York Central 484 Niagara class. Ooh, they're quite cool, yes. See what? Trains near the technical. Sure, I would make sure that armored carriers had a second hangar. That capacity would come in really handy. You see, actually, that sounds like a good idea, but my technique for them would be to have fitted them with external lifts. Okay? And engaging strategy, if he's watching this, is going to be whooping with joy. But if I'd been around to help Henderson at the time, I would have suggested deck edge lifts for the armored carriers. Still kept them armored as they were, but with deck edge lifts, they could have gone up and down. Actually, could have been supported by the armor deck quite easily, and that would allow you much more internal hanging volume. A slight lengthening and increase to roughly 25 to 26,000 tons, and you could have a really, really good carrier with one hangar. Not be too much, not be too bad treaty wise, and could have had a really good ship. Angus Sunham, what city would you honour with a town class named after her that not receive one historically? Ooh. Truro. Definitely Truro. I'd probably be tempted by Cambridge and Oxford, mainly from the point of view of getting the academics on my side. Bristol. I'm trying to think, because some city names were used for counties as well. So there's York, Exeter, London were used for counties. Newcastle got one. Durham? Probably Durham. Yeah, that would be my signing. Leeds. Leeds would have got one. I'm trying to think of another one for Scotland. I don't know. Aberdeen, was that really big enough at this time for an HMS Aberdeen? Glasgow was already given one. Edinburgh was, of course, a given one. So you got Glasgow and Edinburgh already. Yeah. You could have found plenty of cities which would have been deserving for town class. Maybe Epsom, as it's now broadly speaking, home for some people. That Derby was a rest day, so Epsom, Epsom I'll give one as well too. Even though it's a little tiny. This is my hometown. Jerison, I'm not. Is that Jerison? I skipped it. Sorry, it's just jumped down. Jerison, I'm not building carrots and aviation support ship. Yes, a lot more HMS Unicorns. Emmett, what about building 4 KGVs with 15-inch guns and building Vanguard? That way you don't have to build the additional 3 turrets and use the same money to build more tribals. Would that work? Honestly, it could do. With treble turrets, if you're for the 4 KGVs, you could probably actually... with the money you'd save, and that's the thing, if you're not developing a quad turret, if you're not developing all the things you have to develop for the 14-inch guns, you can produce more of them and the resources they get. So you could have actually had a 5th KGV, i.e. Vanguard, probably in service a lot earlier. Bidron, does gunboat deployment in 1979 and 19 to 1979 cover the Indonesian and Malaysian Conference Foundation in the 1960s? Yes, it does. It does. And it also has definitive faults, Altmark and Pueblo, Corfu and Kuwait, Baltic to Beirut, and Deutschland to Dedalo as its principles and precedents of limited naval forces. It's got a lot in there. Shomak, it would be very brutal CQB fighting in Hong Kong. Yes, it would be. It would be very, very tough. Vision, on China, upper middle class people have been leaving the mainland for decades to the US, Canada, Australia. Best weapon in Cold War 2.0 is to have more attractive society. Maybe. Capturing Hong Kong is a nightmare. It's more for delight and also to connected to mainland these days. You can destroy bridges as easily as ever. Steph Thompson, I will look at it. I do have an Xbox. Believe it or not, I do have an Xbox downstairs. Jerison, for town class, also be HMS Chelmsford or HMS Colchester. Often forgot about here in the East. Yeah, they will be good. There will be good ones. You could let's put it this way: you could quite easily. And the thing is, if you had kept building the town class, you probably wouldn't have had the crown colonies as they were come in, because you'd have had the town class production line still going, because you weren't building the didos. So you'd have just kept building town class. So the amount of town class you'd have ended up with by World War II would have been quite extraordinary. Eamon, based on the experiences of World War II, do you think the RN's focus on the 6-inch gun rapid-fire guns was vindicated, or should they have continued to build a mix of 6 and 8-inch armed cruisers? I think it was vindicated. I think the 6-inch gun proved to be fine for what the British needed to do. You have to remember, there is the 6-inch versus 8-inch gun is often said down as, oh, this one's better than the other one. Actually, no, it isn't. They're both very, very good guns, but you have to ask yourself, what do you want to do with your cruiser? What is your cruiser going to be tasked with doing? In that scenario, which is the better gun for that? And that is why the Royal Navy goes with a 6-inch gun. It's not because the 6-inch gun is better than the 8-inch gun. It's because it's a better fit for what they want to do. And the trouble is, so many of the debates come down to a black and white, yes or no, this is right, that must be wrong. When actually it's a nuance. It's a thing of, which is the best fit for you? And 6-inch could be better fit for you, or 8-inch could be. Martin, Dust Clark, how does a Commonwealth fleet sound to you based on Singapore? RN carrier with mixed RN and Commonwealth pilots for F-35 and helis with mixed RN Commonwealth escorts, including Marines. It could be an interesting idea. If it's necessary, it could be done. Richard Hughes, HMS Kingston upon the Hill. No, it's got to be Kingston upon Thames. That's where I go, and that's where I work. It's my university, Kingston Uni. Well, my main one, which I do 3 days a week at. The steady income, theoretically, we call that as a contract lecturer. Steady-ish income. Greg Sussing, if you had a HMS Oxford and HMS Cambridge, and one lost her bow and the other her stern, you could weld into the back into HMS Oxbridge. Yeah, that joke was going to come. The moment I said that, that's a good one, Greg. I'd like that one. Let's give you a furnace. How about HMS Barrow and Furnace? Well, the trouble is then it's HMS Barrow or HMS Furnace. I agree with them, or HMS Barrow and Furnace, which sounds a bit weird. So it's either HMS Barrow or HMS Furnace. Ooh. J-Love, HMS Chatham. I think some of these are C classes of ships, C class cruisers from memory. Some of the earlier ones, which probably got rid of by World War II. John, look, PLC will never give up Hong Kong. They're obviously, but yeah, that's the trouble. SN Pi, bring back Fairburn and Sykes. How long? C1, RM was decrewing old R class. How big a navy could they maintain in the current world? You could maintain up. Remember, the RN. It's going to always sound strange. Okay, so World War II and towards the end of World War II, you have a huge number of escorts. You have a huge carrier fleet coming online. You've got a huge force in transition. That is a massive manpower need, and you're also having to supply a massive army and a massive air force and a massive civilian industries and all sorts of things. You've got to have garrisons all over the world. You've got to have ships all over the world and all these things. So they become an issue, okay? What you're talking about in terms of post-World War II and post-World War II in terms of the Navy, you could do these things if you want. You have a big manpower crunch in 1945, 1947, and 1950 and 1951, because those are the times at which the duration-only people have to leave, and then the duration plus people have to leave. Those people who signed on who duration only, but signed on for an extended time to help Navy with its transition. First generator, your national service people start to go out and all these sort of things, and you're transitioning back to an all-volunteer Navy. It's a big issue to deal with. You start beginning the transition back, it's big, and you're losing generations of people and skills. And all those people who put off their retirement during World War II have to go at some point. So you have a massive transition going on. So of course you have problems. And the thing is, those cause more problems because, in the nicest way, the British don't have to not let them cause problems. They can almost afford to let them cause problems. If they couldn't, they would have found the money to make sure they didn't cause problems. And that's your thing. Right. Oh, I've put up the questions. Okay. Back in a second. I'm just going to see if food's being cooked for me. Because I'm smelling it. Sorry. Back. Ooh. Jerison, has anyone been to McDonald's now they've reopened? No. I'm still on, we're still shielding. Mum and sister are still, under heavy protection. John, given Chinese attitudes in any hot war, it would be ultimately decided in Taiwan. Given that taking Hong Kong or Macau to give back would perhaps be the only way of reaching peace. I really wouldn't like to try and take Macau. I really wouldn't like to try and take Macau. Macau would be a nightmare to try and take. That would be the economic equivalent of suicide on a mass level. All right, so I hope you've all seen the 2 episodes of Bilge Pumps while I'm remembering it that are currently out. They are pretty cool, the 2 new ones, and there are 2 more coming this week, which is always pretty cool. There are lots of, things discussing them. So let's see. Where are the questions coming? There was a bit of a die down in a second, so I sort of gave you a bit of time to get them in. What's with Macau then? Macau is just not a good position to try and take, and it's very, very weighted into the Chinese system. Plus, they have a lot of interesting troops raised around Macau. There's also the fact that to take it, you are directly onto the land, and let's put it this way: whilst Hong Kong has just that, there's enough islands, there's enough sort of parts of separation, there's enough sort of water, you could almost form a defensible isthmus. To take Macau, you would be in a whole lot of world of trouble from the point of view of trying to defend it. In China, the PLA is quite a force. May not be able to project too much power at the moment, but in China it's a big threat. Yeah, that's the thing. You see, you go to the Macau, you're going to have tanks rolling at you in the thousands. You might run out of tank missiles, before you do. You'd run out of anti-tank missiles before they ran out of good tanks, in a way. Richie, don't ever disrespect HMS Warsprite. Yes, that was quite funny. The person who decided that HMS Warsprite was a B team battleship and actually put the question to Drac. I'm not sure whether they were brave or were baiting him. Stafford Thompson, that does sound interesting. Fighting a land war with China is just untenable. Yeah, I can see that one. We can all see that one. And we managed it in Korea, but that was by liberal application of high explosive. A lot of application of a lot of high explosive. A lot of artillery. I don't think we have. The thing is also, you must remember, in Korea, we had the advantage that we had huge stocks of artillery left over from World War II. And it did get used. And you had a lot of ships to come in range to provide shore bombardment and a lot of aircraft carriers. So you could keep up the rotations and a lot of pilots and a lot of things. Basically, Korea was only possible due to World War II. I also remember that, Colonel Winters, the person who's famous for commanding Easy Company during the D-Day invasions, is called out of retirement to train paratroopers for the Korea, I think, from memory. So much. Stav Thompson, enjoy the concrete. I've got to mix some concrete at some point. Put in some ramps. This one, as much as they're amazing, they can't fight a PLM, and yeah. I think that's a reference to the idea of Gurkhas being able to take the mass tanks of the Chinese. No. Wondering, does the West have enough ammunition to fight China? Yeah, that's the problem. Enough ammunition. You'd have to store it, get it all and build it all and store it. You'd have to keep going. You'd have to stockpile it for ages before you got there. He goes major, then I think he becomes colonel at some point. I do know. I'm fairly sure he becomes colonel. Vision, Hong Kong is lost. Taiwan is yeah. That is interesting, but Taiwan. I wish Taiwan did get more support than it does, but I can also understand the reasons why countries are reluctant to it because, in the nicest way, the big nation next door gets very pissy with you. John Luke, invading will not be the aim. It'll be a snatch and grab. John Luke, in the nicest way, that's a way to get a lot of your troops killed. And just because they win once doesn't mean they're going to stop with it or be satisfied with it. Stock. Chatham was a town class pre-World War I cruiser, scrapped in 1928, so the name would be available, especially as it was a Navy town. Yeah, I think HMS Chatham would have been for the town class. New York. I'm off and get. Oh. There are lots of problems with the Three Gorges down. Right, sometimes I hope using C240 mix stuff. Jay Richardson is currently telling a huge amount of stuff on how to make resistant concrete. I'm not wading into that one because honestly, wow, that's a lot of concrete going on. Right, so any naval questions? Is it just me or do the place name ships boring? You have to remember, ships are named after places as a desire for political influence, i.e., those ships are very unlikely to be cut because there'll be a lot of MPs, etc., who'll be shouting about it. Basically, the idea is that you'll have so many MPs saying, "Don't cut mine, cut someone else's," that eventually a government will go, "Oh, for God's sake, just okay, fine, none of them get it cut. We just go away. We got a headache. Please, just go. Find the margin, keep the ships." And that's basically the Navy's cunning plan. Mondori, only way to curb China is for Western. It would need to be a full scale approach. In a joke from the 80s, the Chinese sent a big bag of. Probably. That sounds like a joke the Chinese and the Soviets might be playing on each other. They did fight a fair number of wars in the 80s. Bishop, the US relationship with China is getting so bad that many feel that there is little to lose in backing Taiwan. China is getting enormously bad press in America from every political side. And what you see, it's an election year. No one is going to want to look weak on China. Nighttime Reduction. When it comes to names in RN, I'm surprised we never had an HMS Waterloo. We had an HMS Trafalgar many times over. Carl Gasman, Chinese Navy plan in Cold War. Ooh. They were an interesting side force for much of the Cold War. They've only developed really post-Cold War. They really got strong. For most of the Cold War, they were a green to light blue water navy. Awazowski, that's why a Polish Garon program resulted in one patrol ship instead of 7 ocean-going corvettes. They would have named after birds. Name them after cities. The politicians will never cancel them. Donald Robertson, Mr. Trump re-elected backpedals on NATO time for a Commonwealth Navy approach? Not sure if he realizes what the Commonwealth is. I'm sure he probably does know, but does he realize that it can have defense dimensions? Probably not. And nice way, America's not a member of the Commonwealth, although they could probably work out with it. More likely it would be a Five Eyes approach. That's an existing framework which, whilst it shares intelligence, could do a double as a command and control approach. Because let's be honest, combined operations are all about sharing intelligence. If you've already got that down pat, you're fine. Oh, Mike, have you seen the preliminary SDSR 2020? How much of it do you think will happen in the final review? There's all sorts of... Look, always remember there will be a lot of rumors going around, and it induces a lot of people to start slagging off and sacrificing things from other services to defend their own services. And it's just used by the Treasury as an advantage, which is why I said what I said in my 4,000 viewers video. Basically, in a nice way, first rule of getting into a fight with the Treasury is stop behaving like you can do everyone else's jobs and get rid of them. I'm not sure who put forward the idea of a 20,000 man navy, 20,000 man army. I'm not sure who put forward various ideas for other things, and really, I don't care. All I know is they should shut up, and the services should get together. They had an open day. They had a day with the Defense Secretary. Hopefully they use that to work out what they all want and come up with a plan and start making a case for it. And not be so quickly and easily divided. Hopefully. And I actually saw someone respond today because someone quoted me and said, oh, yes, it's like universities taking on secondary schools and primary schools. And they said, actually, but they do that. Actually, they don't. And that's the way, at no point do universities turn around and go, you don't need primary schools to teach writing or reading or maths because we teach it. At no point, that's not what the education. Occasionally they do get into some bit of fights and ask for more funding, but they never say the other side can't do that because we can do it. I don't get in that kind of fight, and that kind of fight is debilitating. You also do need more than a cyber team to fight a war. I'm very sorry, but you do. Right. Sure, Mac. Should the USN try to get medium capability carriers, Essex or Midway role, despite the possible political consequences? Well, that's the trouble. If the US, it does make sense. Again, I usually go for the 8 and 8 combination. But the trouble is for the USN, if you do get conventional carriers, someone's going to go, that's a carrier, this is a carrier, that's a carrier, it costs half the price. Why are we all buying all these? And the trouble is, you could go, yes, you need the USN big, massive carrier for operations in the Pacific, but we can do the operations in the Mediterranean and the operations in some parts of the Atlantic and the task force, sort of actually multiple as a force multiplier for nuclear carriers in the Pacific if we use the conventional carriers. But it'll be a political nightmare. Vision. I read the USN FFGX frigates to be built in Wisconsin and Great Lakes. We're moving ahead with new icebreakers for USN. Yeah, you can hope. Greg Selcy. Heron Productions, 1918 third rate and 1833 first rate. Yes, we did build an HMS Waterloo. A couple of them, I think. I'm guessing that from Greg Selcy. I'd forgotten that. A third rate and a first rate. Interesting. Jefferson, I'm currently doing the program on an upside down house at the moment. It has a small base and a large roof, like an inverted pyramid. Steamlight, I believe that's building one going on. Steamlight, never heard more on recent Chinese carrier Shandong. Trying to ascertain their stats. Same as Lidong, or have they moved to catapults? Get a few more. There's all sorts of rumours going around, and I've seen a couple of pictures, but I'm not quite sure. So I don't want to jump in on that one yet. I want to do more digging. Angus Sonnet, so long as China, the manufacturing centre for American consumerism, there will not be a hot war between the two. I wish that was the case, but actually, if you look at it, our nations have often gone to war with their biggest trading partners several times. Sorry for being late, but when did the RNUSM need more funding? Then they got the most. World War One, World War Two, pretty much. The Royal Navy Napoleonic Wars got huge amounts. Scipio Africanus, this may be too contemporary, but once there was power failure, was there any way to save the Fresher? When you have power failure, you have a lot of other problems going on. Potentially, but, you know. But not really. It did. The crew at the time will try. They tried their best, definitely. Ron Shield, what would you recommend for books covering naval aspects of the invasion of Japan, 1945 to 46? Reading help paid by Bianco right now. The projected invasion of Japan. There's some good ones by Australian authors, but there's not really a lot done. It's amazing. Projected battles tend to get far less attention when they're amphibious operations than land battles or sometimes sea battles because, well, it's so complicated to put it. Once you're doing an amphibious operation, you have a combination of the land, the air, the sea, especially in 45, 46. You have all sorts of things to play, and it gets very, very complicated to war game. I think there is a book produced by someone who war gamed it, but I can't remember whose name it is, so I'll have to look that up. This round's what was the thickest armor that could have been made by each of the naval powers World War II? Well, if you'd wanted to, you can build massively thick armor. Probably the British and the Americans could build the thickest if they wanted to, as they had the most ready access to the raw materials and the infrastructure to support it. Americans could probably go colossal, but you're probably looking at 14 to 15 inches being the maximum possible. Well, hang on, some did more, didn't they? Am I being cruel, or am I remembering that was 8 to 2? Was that actually a pure of a 16, or was it 2 8 put together? Let me just check, because I have a memory that the one which was bigger than that was 2 small bits put together. Well, the Japanese go with 16-inch, I think, which is on Yamamoto class. But my always suspicion, and I could be wrong on this one, they have 16-inch side armor, which is inclined to 90 degrees, and they have 26-inch on the face of the main turrets. But if you're building big belt armor all the way around and it's 16 inches the whole way around, I can see that being a problem for Japanese industry. Now, I haven't enough digging, so it's interesting that, yeah. You see, the thing is, it's supposed to be 16 inches the whole way around, and that is definitely what build and we talked about. But I've always had a sneaking suspicion that it was made by fusing two 8-inch sets because they've got roughly 8 inches on the lower level. But all the sources I've read have officially said it was a 16-inch fix, so I'll go with that. The Japanese 16-inch. But the Royal Navy and the Americans could have produced thicker, but they didn't really need to. At a certain point, you're defeating yourself because actually, is it better to build it thicker and expend the weight, or is it better to angle it? Because if you're producing angled armor and you've got it angled, then you have greater thickness across, like with a tank, but you also have, less weight, which allows you to go faster. Turrets tended to have the biggest, thickest stuff. Again, you've got the Japanese 26 inches thick, which is lovely. Let's put it this way. There is the stuff which is fitted, and I'm considering the things that are made. I'm making 26-inch thick piece of armor. That takes a lot of infrastructure and a lot of moving. So that would explain a lot about the Japanese production lines of various things. But, and this is the big but, could the Americans and the British produce bigger? Probably, if they'd wanted to. They didn't want to, though. And your question was, what was the biggest that could be produced? So, to be honest, what was the biggest armor that could be made by each of the naval powers? Well, theoretically, the British and Americans could have made it as thick as they wanted, and we're going to go with the Japanese as being 26 inches, but again, that's for Yamamoto's. Let's go with 26 inches, but no. Americans and British are actually usually a bit smaller than that, a bit thinner than that. Dave, any chance you could put the Bilge Pumps episodes on YouTube? I'm having problems listening to the podcast and website. I can't seem to get the volumes up high enough to hear you on my laptop. They're supposed to be for SimSec, but we'll try and sort out the things. Now they've got their own stream, it should be easier. Westplate 1939. How do you think Sheldon costume? I have no idea, but let me have a look at it. How do I sync it? Well, she was one of the last pre-dreadnoughts, wasn't she? And how do I sink a pre-dreadnought? Usually by plunging fire. If Westerplatte 1939, what do I have? That's the question. I would have to do a lot of digging to find out what I had there. Interesting enough, despite having the battleship in support, they actually still fail to take the things, but they can't fire back. You need artillery, you need to do some plunging fire. It's a pre-dreadnought battleship. Vision, ex-USN Acting Secretary Thomas Modley proposed to name FGS Agility class with other ships named Intrepid, Endeavour, and Dauntless. Yeah, that wouldn't work. That would have been the Buzzwords class. Of course, it wouldn't have worked. Come on, guys, any another notable question? Any notable Reggio Marina Italian event during Cold War? They get up to a lot. They have a few collisions with Soviet ships, but they have, fun times. Mainly they have stuff in the Adriatic with the Yugoslavian Navy occasionally. Alfred Mullet, Dust Clark, what was the difference between the US and UK carrier doctrine? People keep trying to compare the four class carriers, which are very different ships in their own doctrine. Okay, so the US doctrine is built around having the best system you can possibly have. And having the money and technology, they can afford nothing to make it work. The British carrier doctrine was designed at a time when the idea was that we were going to have a mixed force, and it wasn't necessarily said, but it was sort of always inferred, a mixed force of carriers and LHDs, eventually during their lifetime of Queen Elizabeth class, and so they could all use the same flight. They would have the air groups, which could be shared between the same flight. Air groups could operate from whatever flight deck, and it was basically a very competent, very logical perspective. And the idea was that you would have ocean and probably Illustrious stay on for a couple of years, and you'd have Queen Elizabeth and Queen Elizabeth Prince of Wales come in service, pay off 2 carriers, then you would pay off Ocean, Illustrious, Albion, and Bulwark in their term and replace them with 2 to 3 LHDs and Argus, and you would have this force, which I actually proposed in my 4,000 subscribers video, as your core, and they would all be able to generate. They would all be able to use intercept as either carrier strike or amphibious lift, depending on the circumstance. They would be 2 of them would be far stronger in terms of carrier strike versus amphibious lift, and 3 would be far stronger in amphibious lift versus carrier strike. But they could all sort of, to an extent, cover for each other. They would be a very capable platform for their primary purpose, and a 70% platform for their secondary purpose. It's a very nice logical idea for a medium power which can only afford a few ships. If you do this US Navy, you can afford basically 2 fleets of LHDs and carriers. The US sailing system works. Of course it does. It's perfect. It's the best technology for both roles. If you're the Royal Navy and you have a far more limited budget, you have to adjust your cloth to fit that. Shomak, if they provided a united front advocating for modern funding increase for all of them, then the Treasury will be hard pressed to object because the experts agree what needs to be done. That's the advantage. That's the thing. Shumran, isn't the first argument not about the appropriate force levels, but what threats need to be countered? Well, that's the interesting thing. Governments have consistently said the same threats need to be countered. So the threats haven't changed. It's the we can do. Oh, I can do that with my. If you cut the money from there, and I can take half that money and I give that to me, then I save you money, and I've got this for my system, and it just causes non-stop trouble. What would it take for the John Luke? What would it take for the EU to field its own navy? Also, what do other big powers, potential ones, have to do to become relevant? For the EU to field its own navy, a whole lot of different scenarios. In a nice way, EU has fielded EU Nav 4, which was basically a British-run operation, but they've now got which was a combined European task force, which was always an interesting scenario because it's layers of command and control and all sorts of weird stuff going on. And the fact that you sometimes have, don't get me started on the flagging, on the hatting of the ships out there, but it works sometimes, other times it doesn't work. The thing is, you'd have to do a lot of work for it to get for a European Union Navy, and I don't think it's going to be happening soon. Otherwise, you'd be seeing a lot more common projects being pushed together. Don Robson, forgive USA for War of Independence, remit to the Commonwealth, get China and Chinese addicted to Yorkshire tea, and problem solved. opium worked better than Yorkshire tea, but we shouldn't really go back there. Nighttime reduction. You touched on this in a previous stream, so sorry if I go around. British carriers or just one up to you at Coral Sea assisting US carriers. The effects? If you have British carriers at Coral Sea, you have a very different scenario going on, especially if they form up pairs like Victorious and Saratoga did. So if you have one carrier concentrator, you have you have pairs of carriers, and they have the British one operating on the air defense role and the US one working on the strike. You then have a very conclusive victory. But who takes the credit for it? Vision, what is the biggest RN vessel that can make it through the Caledonian Canal? Would Loch Ness be a good place to hide an SSBN, camouflage or prehistoric shaped fin? I'd prefer not to hide an SSBN in the prehistoric in the Loch Ness, and probably a river class. I'm not sure. The Caledonian Canal is sort of interesting in that certain points it's hasn't been that well looked after, so I'm going to go with a river class, but I'm not even sure that might even be too deep in draft in places. No. Well, no, there's that much way through it. It's an interesting question. River class, though, is where I'd stick with at the moment. I wouldn't like to take a frigate or anything through it. They've got too many things laying around. Doctor, are you still planning on doing a what-if talk on the invasion of Japan? Scrub. Potentially. I think I was asked about that a while back, and I said I would look into it, and it's possibly going to come up this month, possibly next month, depending. There's a few projects I got an idea for August, not this month, but I mean for August or possibly September, because this month I'm now, this is the thing. I start planning the topics for July in June, for August in July, for September get planned in August. Some get researched earlier as well. There's lots of debates going on about the EU and the UK at the moment. I'm not going to get into them because naval historian. There's all sorts of fun things. One thing I would say when you talk about debt and things with NATO with countries, always remember that a nation's checkbook is not like your personal checkbook. It's a very easy sell for politicians to make it so and say it's the same, but businesses are supposed to run at a profit. Countries don't necessarily run at a profit. What they have to do is they have to run the right size government for what that nation needs at the time, using as close to what the right amount of money at a time. If you want to spend a lot of money, you can spend a lot of money in this nation, but you do have to pay it back eventually. But again, you pay it back in a slightly different way than you do normally. Than I would on a credit card. It's all sorts of things interesting. Also, please, I have written a fair number. I have been involved in the writing of a fair number of my time in these things. Do not trust opinion polls on any topic. Trust me. You can shape questions exactly how you want. Always check who asked for who paid for it, and what were they seeking. Because you can write an opinion poll, and then say the results say one thing. Another, you look at the raw data, look at the questions being asked, and then make your assessment as to the judgment. It's one of the interesting issues that you get with politicians and opinion polls is confirmation bias, because they want an opinion poll run on topic and they have a specific view. If they have too much influence in the writing of the opinion poll, then the opinion poll that comes back supports their view. Surprise, surprise, but it might not actually be a true reflection of what the country thinks. Paul Johnson, in your opinion, what is the best? Which is best, all or nothing armor or compartmentalizing the ships? I would like to do a mixture of both. I like to compartmentalize my ships. I like to have them properly divided up if I'm sort of looking for a better ship, and I would like decent armor in certain places. I quite like the armor that you put on the D class, where you have armor, D class cruisers from End of World War One, where you have armor around the magazines, you have armor around the engine spaces, and you have very good compartmentalization as well. Those things make sense to me. I agree with John Luke. The demise of both parties is often widely over-anticipated. Lots of people want to talk about the demise of things because that's what makes life nice to talk about, because it means they're right. It's the right or wrong perspective, and it's the problem with and when you're dealing with international relations or when you're evaluating ships. So I was talking about the 6 and 8 inch guns earlier. Some people go the 6 inches is best, so therefore the 8 inch must be wrong. Some people go the 8 inch is best, so the 6 inch must be wrong. It's not there. Which is the best fit for you? It's a nuance. And some people want to say, read everything, go, that's going to fall apart. So we were right. Well, it's not going to fall apart, and you still might be right, but that doesn't mean it has to fall apart for you to be right. And it's to say, just, yeah, I give up with Muse. I give up quite a lot of the modern world sometimes. Okay, so in regards to armor, could the idea of a double-hulled 8-inch armor with space allowing spalling and a second 8-inch layer be better than solid armor? In my opinion, it could, especially if you had 2 layers of angled armor. But it would take a lot of work to put it in and design. It would take a lot of a designing effort. Oliver Pikes, would it be possible to have bilge pumps on Spotify like Sea Control already is? It should be already. As they've set up a stream, it should appear on Spotify itself eventually once we reach about 4 or 5 episodes on there. Stephen Wilson, I'm glad you have no problems listening to bilge pumps. Jeff Wheeler, what did I miss? A whole fight about the EU and some good stuff on armor. Seemed like Russia took a war prize post-World War II Italian battleship, supposedly hit an old German mine and sank near Sevastopol. Stalin thought it was Italian sabotage. Italian, maybe. Maybe British, maybe American, maybe German. Who knows? Doctor, outside the US, Europe, who has the most balanced? Outside the US and Europe, who has the most balanced fleet? Ooh, well, okay. It's got to be between Japan. It's got to be Japan, I think, because they have more auxiliaries per tonnage than the Chinese do. But the Chinese don't have many at the moment. The Chinese are growing. Indian Navy, actually, I'll go with the Indian Navy. When I think about global reach in that region, I'm going to go with the Indian Navy. I like the Indian Navy. They're a nice Navy. They are some lovely people to talk to, and I have quite a fair number of retired Indian Navy admirals who follow me on Twitter and who chat away with me quite a lot, and I just find it funny the way they chat away. I don't know what I've done to apparently impress them and cause them to chat with me, but they do, and I love chatting with them. How do you think navies would have developed if World War II didn't happen? Well, that's the interesting thing. If World War II hadn't happened, I think you'd have seen the battleship around for a lot longer. You would have certainly seen aircraft carriers come in an interesting way, and how the aircraft carriers would develop. I think you'd have seen the carry on. The British would have still kept going on and improving fighter defense and fighter control, even without World War II. And having their armored carriers, because they were thinking about that sort of scenario. And I think Indomitable, Implacable, Indefatigable, those sort of ones would be built, and they would get bigger and bigger in terms of, so they get closer to a combination of a ship which was Ark Royal in terms of air wing, but illustrious class in terms of armoring. I think that's what you see in terms of the carriers, and I think you'd have seen the destroyers grow again. I'm not. I think you would have probably seen the small light cruiser disappear in favour of the large destroyer, and concentration on bigger cruisers. Jeff Beeler, Samuel gambles and loses all three. He doesn't have three carriers. He has two. He loses one anyway, but he does have two out there. If Somerville gambles and loses all three carriers, how do British respond? Fast track live fleets? Yeah, that's the only option they can do. If the air groups are mostly intact on Ceylon, then it's fast track the light fleets. That's your only option. That and strike escort carriers probably. Jepila, what happened to NATO AWACS squadron? They are going to probably end up going with the E7s, which the British have gone with and the Australians have gone with, because those are the only real options. But they're still considering and working on it officially. Unofficially, when you're looking for some, there are European projects and options available, but when you're looking for something which is an off-the-shelf, virtually available to build model, which has certain characteristics, the only option pretty much is the Wedgetail. Vision, USN are moving to name capital ships after worthy but lower ranking enlisted military heroes like the future Ford class USS Doris Miller, which cannot be cancelled by anyone. How to guarantee you're going to get a fourth Ford class? I love that. Go US Navy. Doris Miller deserves it. Definitely. I'm 100% behind that. But also, great politics, USN. You would deserve a round of applause. You did it. You worked out. How are we going to guarantee to get a fourth Ford class? We will make it uncancelable. No one will cancel Kennedy, because that will just be bad. And no one will cancel Doris Miller. No one. No one in their right mind, not even, no matter who ends up in the White House, no one will cancel Doris Miller. Very sensible. And able seem to set an admiral class. There's no point for the Royal Navy in doing it. In the nicest way, yes, the Royal Navy could do it, but the nicest way, the Royal Navy don't have. Think about it. How many famous able seamen can you name? Could do maybe if how many famous captains? How many famous? The thing is, in the Americans, they do have these stories. They do have some very famous non-commissioned. In Britain, we have. I can name a fair number, but I don't think the Royal Navy is going to name a ship Johnson Bahari. I don't think it's going to name after VC winners, etc. There is a different culture in the UK, so we are going to go with naming them after places. We're going to go with naming them, in the case of our aircraft carriers, Queen Elizabeth I, Prince of Wales, Ark Royal, these sort of things. That works for us. It works for our naming culture. You always have to be very careful of thinking, because one version of a naming culture works in one nation politically, that it'll work in another. It doesn't. Every nation is unique in terms of this naming culture. Steve Perfect. Martin Doherty, I think I've lost your first part of your question. Mm-hmm. Jerison, all I've got is Royal Marine fast attack vessels filled it when I last saw it. I'm not sure what that's coming to. Jeff Beeler, I don't think the Chinese can invade Japan in 1894. Maybe they were able to send reinforcements to Korea. It's a big sea with no radios. Yeah, it's definitely true. Richard Humes, you keep going, we're doomed. I know you've been watching lots of Dad's Army, but you know. Sam Wilson, confirmation bias is a real thing. It's a massively difficult, problematic thing in politics, especially with the obsession with polling. Jeff Beeler, why is Stalin's ocean-going fleet so cheap in the UK and so expensive in North America in the book depository? Because America doesn't like Stalin? I don't know. But it's a really good book, so I get it. Confirmation bias, it's been confirmed as a real thing in so many studies that have come over the last 50 years, but people still do it. And there is the classic example given in Yes Minister. And it is so true. I have actually done a poll once for local elections. I was involved and I actually included 2 questions which were mirror images of each other. And I got identically but flipped results. So on one way, the way phrase one direction, one side won. Phrase on the other one, and the other side won. And I turned it round to my some people at the time who were involved in the moment. So that's your answer to your question. They didn't like me for that one. They felt I'd wasted questions, but I didn't. I made the point that everything was open to persuasion if actually someone delivered a decent argument. Carl McGasman, they have a question. The situation inventory of the Polish Baltic Fleet. Ooh, currently? They have a fair number of good ships, but they don't have enough of them. And the most interesting thing, of course, is their recent project, which was supposed to secure 7 corvettes and ended up doing 1 patrol ship. They just have problems with procurement. Mainly because their army is a very visible and obvious reason to procure. Have you seen what's next door? Give me more money, I need tanks! Have you seen what's next door? Have you seen what's happening down south? I need more money. Give me tanks, give me tanks, give me tanks. Works very well for the army. For the Navy, it's like a case of, have you seen what's up round the corner there? Up round the corner there? And they go, well, there's all these Baltic navies. Why do we need, DF, I see a strange trend in US designs. They will design a ship like the LCS, then another navy will order a much better version. See, kids, when it happens, why US doesn't transition to better ship too? Because that's not the US version. South Thompson, I'm glad I am the escape from Mad World. I try and keep myself as an escape from Mad World because, frankly, I don't see the point in getting involved into it unless I need to. Don Robson, a new Cold War between USA and China. Good to get the RN you promote. Also, chance for gold to flow from USA to the UK once. It might be. I'm fairly sure that there is a fairly good. One of the interesting things is there is a fairly good British-American trade network going up, and there's always been fairly good at British-American trade, and there is a fairly good trade within the entire Anglosphere system. There is a reason for this. There is one stunning advantage for trading within the Anglosphere, as I tend to call it. It's that first language. They speak English as their legal documents. So it makes the understanding, okay, the legal systems are slightly different and have slightly different terminology, but it makes all the things that much cheaper and easier, which is why you often see things expand within the Anglosphere first before they go to non-English speaking countries, or rather non-primary English speaking countries. It has an advantage. It's the linguistic bias. Jerison, do you think World War II RN gun numbers had too much difference between 8-inch cruiser and the 14-inch battleship guns? No middle ground? No, and honestly, I don't see the 9.2-inch coming through. I see them keeping the 8-inch as the thing going in, and then 8-inch being it for the heavy cruisers. But the thing is, what do you need the middle ground for? It's one of the things people often say is, oh, we need the middle ground gun. And I go, okay, fine, what do you need it for? If you have the heavy guns, the 40-inch, 15, 16-inch, okay, you have the heavy firepower. And the small guns give us the the volume firepower. Why do I also need to put in a third set of guns in the middle and deal with all the logistics issues when I've got this and this? When I haven't got this and this, then making this makes sense because it's the balance between a combination of the two. It's neither one or the other, but it's in the middle that gives me the advantage. If I have this and this, then I don't need this. It's just extra complications. So this is the thing. It's again, it goes back to the newest problem. What is the best fit for your navy? What is the best thing you can want and get out of it? Mm-hmm. Paul Johnson, sloping armor on ships seems to be counterproductive when shells aren't on a flat trajectory. Yeah, it still works. Doesn't matter whether they're in nicest way. Even if it's coming down, it helps be a deflecting blast. It still works. Unless they're coming in directly at this point angle, anything off, they're going in at. They've got a longer. If it's the armor sloped, they've got further to go. You've got greater thickness between it and the other side. Jeff Miller, where was Buster Crabbe on 29th of October 1955 when Norris was sunk? I have no idea. John Nick, who are future naval powers waiting in the wings that we don't consider yet beyond the usual suspects? Anyone in Southeast Asia, excluding India, Asia, Africa, and South America? There's always Brazil. We always bring up Brazil, Chile. They're always potentials. It's interesting thing is talking about Singapore the other day on bilge pumps, and I always think about them, especially as you've got unmanned ships coming in service. They are a fairly well-off, tech-rich, tech-savvy nation who that could really take advantage of unmanned ships to really grow their power. Sometimes might have said, listening close as possible, what would you think the best thickness of armor for a belt would be to counter today's main guns and shrapnel from incoming intercepts? Probably 8-inch sloped if you had it internally. So, Steel Panther 88. I reckon anti-ship missiles are so powerful that belt armor doesn't make that much sense nowadays. It does to an extent. It wouldn't be belt armor as you would conventionally understand it. It would be internal sloped armor, definitely. And it would be more a case of you can come into the outer compartments, boom, you would detonate there, but the explosion would go no deep. So instead of you thinking of it as an armor as resisting the impact, you think of it as an armor as stopping the impact going further into the ship. So kind of like a bulkhead, a reinforced bulkhead. Strub, the USN. Should the USN have leased the Trouble design, or did the Fletcher design class fit the USN better? They fit the USN class better. The Fletcher class fitted the USN better. Oliver Pike, what other non-cancelable names can you think of for other Fords? Non-cancelable names. I'm fairly sure you can find a few in the Vietnam War and the Korean War if you go looking for them. Even a couple in the World War II. For starters, mine would be there's a fair number, once you've gone through Doris, there's a fair number. If you follow that trend, there is a fair number going along there who could deserve it and could be uncancelable, as long as you make sure their story is published well enough in front of beforehand. And let's be honest, Doris Miller's story was publicized quite well beforehand in a very big movie. That's part of it, but Jeff Beanham, how did Philip Neame feel when he heard H. Jones had been killed? He really was actually a bit pissed off, but he was both shocked, pissed off, and then he got to work, basically. And I'm fairly sure you just listened to one of the Falklands War series podcasts. But that wasn't a question I asked on air. Carl Gasman, Steel Panther 88, and anti-ship missiles can be programmed to hit the superstructure from above, crush the electronics, and set everything on fire if belt armor not sufficient looks sufficient. That's the thing, you don't tell people you have the belt armor. Jeff Beeler, did Stalin's Navy, or Gorshkov's for that matter, have a very extensive fleet train? They were hoping for them. That's what they did want them. Stephanie Wilson, the stuff Dobson, Billtron was good. I love the ideas of pick-and-mix ships. That is the thing. And this is the point when people talk about getting rid of Albion and Bulwark, I'm sitting there going, excuse me? I have plans for those ships. I could use them very well. Just give me 5 minutes and a few £1 million, and I can turn them into something which is going to be amazing for future warfare. And we've got the ship sitting there ready to go. Okay, admittedly, I'd like a hangar on them for it. The helicopters they're going to need for the crews, but they've got personal accommodation. They've got huge dock space. I can use them for big. Yeah, I can use them for big ones. I can use them for little ones. I could have an indoor collection for the little ones, and it goes through and puts out. And I can also have space at the back for big ones to dock in. It could be brilliant. What I have to do is get out my way. I'd also like to keep them for Royal Marines amphibious lift, but I can replace them with LHDs for that. The Langdon board could be so good for the first generation of new super unmanned surface vessel control ships. Right. Tis France, why didn't the Royal Navy seem to have better humidity control on ship magazines? They're supposed to be down below the waterline, so usually they're okay. Jeremy, is the webcam on, or is there a subsidence in the house? It was straight when I set it up. In my defense, it was straight when I set it up. But currently, it appears to be it's on a pile of books, and I think the books have slightly moved. And the books have slightly moved. I only just realised this. The thing is, I can see one corner, so I can tell if I'm moving or not, but I haven't noticed that it's been sort of slightly slipping down. Strub, Doctor, could India take on China fleet head to head? Yes. Not in the South China Sea. I wouldn't want to do it if I was letting Indians in the South China Sea. But if they decide to take them on and have a fight in Southeast Asia, they could probably have some fun with them. Seb Thompson, Dust Clark, simple way to end a political trot. I do love Sir Winston Churchill's jokes, phrases, but you know, sometimes. 71. I remember that mission to Mars that crashed because someone forgot to specify which units they were using. Oh yeah, that was fun. Calvin Gasbird, between 8 and 14 inch, only when the right. Yes. Right, I will be going about 9:30, theoretically. And theoretically, I say, because looking at these questions. Right then, going through the questions. Richard Hughes, what are the greatest threats in the PLA Navy? Land-based missiles and submarines at the moment. But not the ballistic missiles. I'm not so worried about them. I'm more worried about their cruise missiles. Serena, Steel Panther 88. For all the things said about Singapore, aren't they kind of reliant on their neighbours and allies? Like there's not enough space for air bases in Singapore. To get strategic depth, what they do is they do send a lot of their aircraft abroad and these sort of things. But that's not because they don't have the air bases space. It's because they don't want their forces to be wiped out in a first strike. Bertrand, should Germany think of building a fleet of carriers? It should think about it, but I doubt it's going to. They've got other issues that they prefer to spend their money on. Sam Thompson and Dr. Clark, back to ships, well boats. I think I take you've seen the new Mark 8, Mark 7 PBR by the States. Haven't heard you mention it. How come? Mainly because. It's one of those things. The Mark 6 patrol boat. Okay, let's start off. I think the Mark 6 patrol boat has a lot of great potential, but I also think it's being sent into scenarios which it might not necessarily be suited for. And I can understand that they've developed a riverine and littoral waters craft, but I have a feeling it's going to find itself in scenarios it's not well designed for. So that's my problem with it. But it's interesting. But I haven't really mentioned it because I haven't really been asked about it. We might talk about it in the future build pumps. We've got something coming up. Strub, Doctor, how was the Fletcher best choice for the USN? It fitted their doctrine of naval warfare. Well, that's the thing. It fitted their doctrine. Their guns and all these things fitted their style and what they wanted for their destroyers to do. You have to remember, the USN is looking at building a fleet mainly to fight a war in the Pacific. If they fight a war in the Atlantic, the German they're really considering, well, who are they going to be fighting in the Atlantic War? Well, why would the Germans take on the Brits, take on the Americans on the outside Atlantic? So their only real scenario is if they end up fighting the Brits, and that's a really nightmare scenario. They'll prepare for it, but they're not massively concerned with it. There's a likelihood. So they're building a war to fight the Pacific against the Japanese, which means you need a specific tile of ship. You need a specific tile which is going to fit with what your operations are going to be. And the USN is still building towards the idea of massed fleet destroyer engagements right into the late 1930s. Whereas the Royal Navy, basically, the moment you build the Tribal class, you're admitting you're not going to be doing a mass fleet engagement. You're admitting you're going to need more ships than your light cruisers to provide the fire support for your destroyers. Okay. I have managed to catch up with the questions. The first step in recovery from book addiction is admitting you have a problem before the foundation of house gives away his best. Angus O'Sonnell. Well, you did say you thought. Someone did say they thought the room was slanting. Vision. I think Frederick Douglass should get a USN carrier, cruiser, or carrier named after him. It would be very tempting. I'm surprised there hasn't been a USS Martin Luther King proposed for an aircraft carrier. Our plan anti-ship cruise missiles ex-Soviet designs with modern sensors and data processing. They're mostly copied French versions, I think. They seem to have got hold of some variations of the Exocet at some point in their history, and their missiles have developed since. So I would say they've got mixed French and Soviet roots. Strub, Doctor, the CVEDR in the USN used the class as auxiliary ships, easier to slot into your fleet versus combat vessels. They were quite good. The CVEs would slot into lots of roles. Once you have them, you can start doing things with them. That's the thing. Steel Panther, Dr. Clark, I liked your Convoy War video series on Battleantic, but I wish there was more information about convoy escort war tactics and how the battle was fought. Look books on this? As I think I've said before on convoys, and I'm planning on doing more about convoys, the actual tactics at some point. Arctic Convoys by Vice Admiral B.B. Schofield and Russian Convoys by B.B. Schofield are two of the best convoy books you can get. They're really, really good. Because they're written by an admiral who was actually in command of destroyers doing the convoys, rather than necessarily by people who are just talking about it. I'm not sure about Malcolm X as a thing, as a carrier name, but Martin Luther King was, of course, a pacifist, but the advantage of Martin Luther King is that he was also a bit of a statesman-like figure. So, in Max's way, if you're going to name your aircraft carrier for anyone, you probably go for him rather than Malcolm X. In the nicest way, Dave. Considering some of the presidents who've had aircraft carriers named after him, I think Martin Luther King is probably more deserving. 99 Andrew, Dr. Clark. Drac put the HMS Bristol petition on his channel. If someone sends me a link, I'll put it on mine as well. New AKB 4472. How did China get hold of Exocets? The French sold them to them. Vision. For a long time, a group of fans have been trying to get a ship named after a USN vet and sci-fi author, Robert A. Hannine, Starship Troopers. I suppose it would have to be one with Marines on it. That would be good. A nice America class, probably. Calvin Gasman. Naval World War I convoy question. Explosive grapnel sweeps for anti-submarine warfare option? Ouch. It's an it would be it would be an option, but by gum would it be painful if it caught on anything. Paul, I thought US carriers were traditionally named after famous former presidents. They have been named after so many different things in their time. In nicest way, where do you think USS Enterprise comes from? There are lots of different names which have been used for United States carriers, and yeah. Stop. Having battleships used to mean you're at least a major regional power. What class is the modern equivalent? Probably amphibious ships of some kind. Having some amphibious shipping, decent amphibious shipping is usually it. Definitely, probably some amphibious shipping. So Steph Thompson, Dr. Clark, am I mistaken that the main problem with social advocate leaders? There is lots of vetting issues with lots of people. No one is a saint, though. No. Very salty. But there again, do they have to be? This is another thing. Where again, now we have this whole thing where you're either good or bad, and it's black and white, and yes and no, and you're sort of going, no. People are nuanced. Human beings are nuanced. In the nicest way, you're all seeing me on here, we're talking. I'm a friendly, approachable person. But if you caught me on a day where I had not eaten at all, had not eaten at all, had spent the day dealing with all sorts of reams of paperwork, and I don't know, you were nasty to my dog, you would probably find that I would start shouting and swearing at you, which wouldn't look good if someone recorded it afterwards and went, oh, look, this is Alex being mean because he's shouting and swearing at this person. Well, there are factors which are affecting that. I'm human. And yes, there are other things which are less excusable and things which are more excusable in life, and those views can change over time of what's excusable and what isn't excusable. But don't expect people to be saints. There is a reason why people were often made saints long after they died, because a lot of the stuff could be forgotten. Canonization was a long process traditionally. Grosowski, yes, but then they got to Clinton and Bush Jr. and suddenly got controversial. Yeah, that happens. Paul Johnson, Doctor, by gum, are you sure you have no Yorkshire ancestry? I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure. You never know. Yes, I do realise that, but if someone just videoed it and they didn't have the context of why I was angry, they didn't video the bit where you were rude, the person was rude to my dog, then you could just go, look, he's being angry, he's being nasty. That's never actually happened. For some reason, being a roughly 6 foot tall, quite large, usually quite gym fit, white male wandering around with quite a big dog, even though he is a poodle, people tend to not be rude to me. I can't think why under those circumstances. But I'm just giving it as an example, and then you can then sort of. So you always have to remember, look at history, read it forward, and try and read it in its context. And that still doesn't mean some people are suddenly good when we're looking at them for their bad deeds. It doesn't suddenly make them nice people or good people, and it doesn't make them necessarily what they did right or wrong. It just means read it forward and look at it in its context. Give people their due. Give them the same. Always give a person in history the same level of understanding you would like to be given yourself. That's my view. It gets me into trouble sometimes, but that is my view. Jerison also wasn't MLK investigated soldier. He was investigated by a lot of things by the FBI at the time, but that's because of the FBI at the time. Hoover was a paranoid whatsoever. He was good as your. Maybe not. You want someone who's that paranoid as your head of the FBI in the Cold War because he keeps the FBI doing their work. But it does mean that the FBI investigate a lot of people who they don't really need to. So, what warships are most effective in the Baltic Sea in modern times? I reckon that subs and I would say corvettes would be the sort of. I would be going for subs and corvettes. Corvettes which have a mine laying capability and minesweepers probably. Because you look at corvettes in many ways are the pre-World War II you had the sloop, right? And that could become your fighting corvette or your mine layer or your minesweeper by quickly working it out, depending on what you're looking for. So basically what you're saying is what you need is sloops and subs. And if you start quibbling over whether or not you need a corvette or not, you're just saying, well, do I need the fighting version of the sloop? You do. In the nicest way, what you really need is a sloop, which can do all the old roles. But I don't want to get into that because that gets us into the Black Swan debate, which is most weird and strange. Because the Black Swan is lovely on paper, but in practice for Britain, it was a lovely thought exercise. Some people do get nasty to dogs. And also, some people, the thing I always find annoying is I've had one person who recently said, oh, this person was nasty to their dog. And I know that a particular person, from walking my own dog, is scared of dogs. So I tend to give them a wide berth with my dog because he's a big dog. So I tend to wave at them. And actually, my dog sometimes hops up. So he's on my paw. He's sort of giving me a hug. And I get him to wave at them. And they like my dog. They're scared of dogs normally, but they like my dog. And my dog's the one they probably get closer to. But in another scenario, they have, I know, been very upset with someone who has come close to them with their dog. And in the nicest way, you can understand that scenario. That person's scared of. There are some people who just shit, excuse the French, but they're just some people are. But it happens. But again, it's context. Richard Duxar, any thoughts of Taiwanese Navy, particularly regards eclectic collection of ships, some quite old, and failure in diesel submarine development procurement? They get there with diesel submarine procurement. They're really motivated. And eclectic collection of ships. Well, in the nicest way, getting rid of anything makes you a lot weaker when you're facing off against that number of people. Jeff Beeler, did you ever interview Chris Keeble? Ooh. I think we talked about it. I'm not sure if we actually did one. It'd be on the list if it is. Veteran, my dad shakes his head at Royal Navy names like HMS Ant, Grant, Anat, and Glowworm. Well, they worked. At the time, we needed a lot of names. Jerison, and the new AKB 472, I never used to like him until he started making videos on removal of statues, and his symposium series is okay if a little propagandist. Okay. Not sure what's going on there. They're obviously a different topic. Strub, how do you think the virus will affect the fleets next year and 5 years down the line? It's going to make the fight for funding that much more difficult in the Western nations, but it's also going to be the thing that the Chinese, if they're continuing their build-up, that will probably cause... Initially, it'll cause people reaction, and then they'll have to overcompensate, probably, if China keeps building up and starts getting problematic. So it could cause will probably cause maximum expense, because the most sensible thing would be to continue funding at the current level, because if you cut money, it then costs a lot more money to rebuild it. Whereas if you keep the money, keep the stuff going, keep the programs going, it's far easier to build them up and far cheaper. But I have a feeling it'll be the less sensible option than the sensible option. Just remember, the fall of the Berlin Wall was a big problem for the West. It had no external threat and and very partisan politics over very petty topics. Yep, that's happened on a lot of weird things. Right, in about 8 minutes, I finished about 9:30. Okay, because I've got to take the fluffy researchers in for a walk and get my sausages. I might energy. I was watching US History Channel on YouTube the other day. They did not realize the Royal Naval officers in Nelson's era did not purchase their commissions. Oh, good lord. Calvin Gasma, Baltic corvettes with a decent stealth for now, if they will die. Maybe. There are other ways you can work it out. You can say stealth necessary, but stealth is a bit of a one-trick pony, especially on ships if they're found. There are other options you can go instead of going stealth. ECM, electronic countermeasures is far what I would go with. Ships you have a lot of power supply if you use it right. Stealth mixed with ECM, a little bit of stealth, a lot of ECM. Vision. Most dogs on my street are fine, but one snarls viciously at everyone walks past. There is a fence, but I wouldn't trust it. I've stopped walking down street. It growls and barks even at 1 a.m. That sounds like a dog which is not being well looked after by its owners. Yeah. Strub, Doctor, since World War II was the last time we had a major naval war. Yeah. How would the modern economy shipping companies react to a major war? Panic. Absolute panic. And don't get me started on implementing the idea of a convoy system and them losing the just-in-time logistics methodology, actually having to work things out in advance. Oh my lord, that would cause panic. Jerison, do ships have CBRN capabilities? I'm surprised that they didn't use gas Martian style a Thunderchild in the First World War. Trouble is salt water and the wind conditions and weather conditions at sea do make mustard gas less viable, really, for ships. And yes, they do have CBRN capabilities. Most ships do have a way of wetting themselves and washing themselves down to clean off chemicals and biological agents and can seal themselves up. I have 6 minutes till 9:30. Just remember, helicopter carrier submarine, brilliant or amazing? Oh, good God, no. Maybe if you could have a sub-launched rotary UAV. Jeff Beeler, Monday's next session. Monday is next session, yes, because I have work Tuesday night, so I have Monday's next session. It's the first patron one, which is what do we keep from World War II, World War One for World War II, and I have video going. But what I've done is I've set up a matrix because I'm looking forward to a big discussion, and I think Monday night will be a big discussion. It will be a colossal discussion probably because it's everyone. I've set up a criteria and kind of like what we're seeing with How to Defend Malaya. I'm looking forward to people putting forward their ideas. So the video is going to go up at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. So it's going to be up for 12 hours before the actual thing begins, and then that's going to people give lots of ideas to come up with their own what they keep for World War One for World War Two. And I put forward another interesting scenario because I've picked a different admiral to who I would be this time. So you've got to think you're that admiral. What's they thinking? We have a bit where the dog sign, and mine's a standard poodle who would probably hug and kiss people to death. No, he actually no. That I tell a lie. I have seen what happened when he thought someone was attacking my mum. He got between her and he did go. But that particular tradesman never came back again. But he was being quite rude and shouting at my mum at the time, and was doing this in midair in front of her. And me and Karen and I walked in just as Raleigh, the fluffy research assistant, appropriately named, basically got between them and was going. What's really funny was he was about 6 to 8 months at this time, so he was really tiny. He was not the full-grown dog he is now. Paul Dr. Clark, do modern navies have doctrine for dealing with shore-based anti-ship missiles, particularly mobile trucks-based ones? Yes, they do. Mostly involves trying to take out the kill chain or kill them first. Scrub, Doctor, could you do a talk on modern convoy systems? We haven't implemented one in ages, so I will do a talk about World War II convoy systems, and we'll talk about how it could relate to modern ones at some point. How's that sound? Jerison, surely the shipping companies have learned from the Iran-Iraq war and subsequent Iran tensions. Have you seen what happened recently when Britain had to convoy its flagged and friendly ships through the Straits of Hormuz? Okay? Seen the issues that happened? Not fun. 2 minutes. Right then. 900. My last boat was called Surprise after Jack Aubrey's ship from Patrick O'Brien. Oh, cool. Septon, thank you for another great chat. Looking forward to next build programs and see how big your warehouse ends up. Safe walk. Best of you. Take care. Right. Adam, we'll try and keep him talking. I can see that. Steel Panther, 88. Does it make me a bad person if I find World War II British ships ugly? Steel Panther, I am not rising to that bait. I am a university lecturer. I have had far worse struck to me by students to try and make me angry. All right. Take care. Thank you very much to everyone for watching. Thank you very much for taking part. Thank you to everyone who's subscribers. I think links to Patreon, links to the Discovery, links to all sorts of things are down below. Enjoy. On Patreon, the vote for August is now live. There are 6 options. The 6 options that are being considered, the top 2 will get it in for Patreon. We'll get the top 2. The 6 options are. I'm just looking them. I'm just getting them up again. The options for August that are being decided over are Paul from Chicago. Was the British entry into World War I and the abandonment of naval supremacy in favour of military strategy? Basically, I think was it sensible? Daniel Freeman, what if the Tsingtao incident goes hot and we have war in the Pacific in early 1939 kicking off? Inspired by Matt Kidd, could PRC have successfully invaded Taiwan in 1950s? Could they today? A factual and projected invasion analysis. Currently in the lead at Tony Penfold's The Little Boat Wars, MTBs, MGBs, SBS, SAS operations in the Mediterranean in World War II. Bail in Order, Mediterranean gunboat diplomacy in the Victorian era, Constantinople and Alexandria, 1878 to 1882. That's in second place. And Mark Nair, Royal Navy in Colour, the evolution, designs, and use and success or lack of Royal Navy camouflage and paint schemes. 16 votes in total so far already. That's out of 36 patrons. So there's 20 more votes to go. That could all change. But it could be fun. Right. Take care. See you all tomorrow. Evening, Jay Richardson. Evening, Eamon. Take care, 99 Andrew. Take care, Tis Francis Fault. Take care, Strub. Carl. Stephen. Richard. Stephanie. Take care. Paul. Have fun. Albert. Good evening. Jay Illingworth. Take care. Bell and Laura. Always a pleasure. And take care, everyone. Take care. Toodles. Take care, Greg. Take care, everyone. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Night, AKB 47472.